Hey guys, welcome to Fanfic Fanatics. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was Superman and had harem? Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is MHA, Man of Tommorow by LOSGHOST 10. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Izuku had been through a lot this past year. From saving Bakugo and gaining the attention of his now mentor All Might to joining UA after saving his now best friend Ochako Uraraka. And it didn't stop there, as the USJ incident happened, and then shortly after the sports festival where he helped his newest friend Shoto Todoroki. But that didn't come close to what had happened recently. Izuku along with his entire class and sibling Class 1B had been attacked while at their summer training camp with the wild pussycats, but just like all the other trials he went through in his life so far, he didn't give up and fought his hardest, pushing himself to go plus ultra. Whether it be the sludge villain, Bakugo and Iida, Todoroki, or even Stain and Muscular, he always prevailed. That was until now. Now Izuku kneeled on his scraped knees, staring horrified at where he had seen the villains disappear with Bakugo. They were just gone with no way of reaching them all because he was too weak and hurt to get to on them. It took a full minute for the situation to sink in for all those present. Izuku was the last one, and when he did, he let out a gut-wrenching scream full of anguish and failure that reached all the way to the camp. It was also at this point he succumbed to the pain his adrenaline-filled body had been ignoring. He passed out in the arms of his friends and classmates, with his last thought being of his old childhood friend, Kaka-chan. "I couldn't save you. I was too weak." Our green-haired protagonist wasn't sure how long it had been, but when he opened his eyes to see a void of swirling energy, he quickly started to panic. He sat up and got an eyeful of his surroundings, or to better described as a lack of one. He appeared to be in a misty and shadowy place, with the only thing being inside of it was an island of concrete he currently stood or sat upon. This confused him greatly, mainly due to him remembering being in the woods after failing to save Bakugo, and now was in, well, he didn't know what to really call it. Getting up fully, he walked around the concrete island looking for anything of interest that could explain why he was here and maybe what here was. It was however a fruitless endeavor, as he soon found out. There was nothing here, and Izuku started to panic. Okay, this is bad. Really bad. Did I die and this is purgatory or something? It would explain the nothingness and the fact I don't feel pain from the injuries I had received from my fight earlier with Muscular, but what about? His muttering started up as per usual, and to the figures who were watching just facepalmed or giggled and laughed at the broccoli's habits. That was until a feminine voice spoke up from behind him. "Sheesh kid, you sure know how to talk, though it is sort of cute in a weird stalker type of way." Izuku turned around in a flash and got into a fighting stance. He saw the woman and other figures besides her and couldn't help but ask, excuse me, but takes a look around. Do you know where we are?" The woman smiled and was about to answer before a bald man cut her off. "Sure thing, kiddo. You're in one for Ak." The man was interrupted by the woman strangling him with her cape. "Damn it, you bald bastard, I was talking to the cute broccoli." Blinking at the sight of the two fighting, Izuku looked over to the others and raised an eyebrow. Two of the men weren't looking at him, and the others were sort of strange in Izuku's opinion. One was frail with white unkempt hair. To his sides were a man made of golden flame, which felt familiar to him, and a shorter male with a high collar jacket with short black hair, and a little off to the side of them, standing alone, was a tall lanky figure with gray hair and a strange line going down his face. "Can one of you explain, since they appear to be occupied?" Izuku said, giving the two who were fighting a glance. The other's sweat dropped and the white-haired one stepped forward. "Yes, I believe I'd be the best to do that since I was the first. To keep it simple, you're inside one for all and we are the past users. That's the second and third over there, and this is the fourth Hikage Shinomori. The tall bald one is Daigoro Banjo and is the fifth, and the other next to me with the tall collar is the sixth, named N." Izuku mentally noted this all down and turned to the woman and the flaming man. "So the woman must be Nana, the seventh user and mentor of my predecessor All Might. He told me a little about her, but I think he understated how pretty she was, and if I'd hazard a guess, the flaming man represents All Might Sensei." The first and fifth laughed at this, and N simply nodded. The first then did a facepalm and said, "I seem to have forgot to introduce myself. I'm the first user and my name is Yoichi Shigaraki, but I believe it's time we discussed why you are here." At this, Izuku perked up and looked at the first with his full attention. Yoichi, seeing this, gave a lame approving nod and started to explain. "So you basically evolved the quirk to something even we who are inside of it are unsure of. But I must commend you on the genius idea of having one for all active as long as possible in a low percentage and gradually upping it once you get used to it. Although I think figuring out a way to have it on while you sleep was a little too much even for us. Izuku blushed and rubbed the back of his neck. Why yeah, but I can't say it didn't help with stamina training and help me improve, but yeah, the whole sleeping with it on was probably pushing it a little. The first smiled at the newest successor and nodded. That being said, what you've done is quite extraordinary. I believe we would call it quirk singularity, but even that would be a stretch due to how much it's more evolved for it to basically be in its own category now. Izuku tilted his head confused. What do you mean? One for all still feels the same and works the same way from the very first day I used it. At this, Nana shoved the unconscious body of Banjo to the side and brushed herself off. Oh, but that's because it never had the time to fully integrate the new changes. Think of it like a update on your phone that you put to update at night when you're sleeping. It's kinda like that, but with an extremely powerful quirk that's gonna become even more powerful and do things that we have basically no idea about. Quote. Holy all might. Are you serious? The greenette shouted. Nana giggled at the fanboy and patted his head. Yup, so basically you're getting a new and improved one for all. And not just that, but we think you'll maybe get our quirks too, or a form of them, since we don't really know anymore since it's changing so much. Izuku was even more surprised to hear this. I'm gonna have more than one quirk. That's outrageous. Maybe I'm just having a fever dream or something from the drugs the hospital have gave me. The tall brunette woman rolled her eyes and flicked the green-haired boy on the forehead. Hey. None of that, we are super real, so don't get your fanboy panties in a bunch. Izuku pouted and rubbed the spot where he got flicked before he realized this was all real. Oh okay, so, I'm gonna become more powerful than even All Might after this. I mean seriously, with that many quirks and with one for all getting stronger with every time it gets passed down, that would mean I would already become stronger than All Might. With this newly evolved quirks I would have more of an arsenal to use in. Once again he started rambling, making everyone's sweat drop. Even the now awake Banjo sighed and rubbed his neck. Nana, your successor sure does know how to pick M. At least he's not into that weird stuff like N over there. N sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. For the last time, I'm not into BDSM. Just because I wear a leather jacket with a tall collar doesn't mean anything, and if anyone here was into that stuff, I'd be you with that leather jacket exposing your chest and your quirk that can bind people. Banjo turned and growled. You're just jealous that I have a useful quirk for combat and you don't. The two started bickering like siblings, finally knocking Izuku out of his ramblings and making him notice that he started feeling strange. Guys, I'm feeling pretty weird, like super weird. The others looked his way and were surprised at what they were seeing. For one, Izuku's once blackish green hair was now a blackish blue, and his eyes, which were once green, changed slowly to blue like his mentor All Might. What? Why are you all looking at me like that? And are you guys getting shorter, or is that just me? Said the now evolving boy. Nana, who was the closest, was the one to speak up. Don't be surprised, kid, but you're kinda changing, like physically changing. It's probably the quirk evolving finally, and these new changes are the outer indicators of it, probably. Izuku's eyes widened. Wait, what? How am I changing other than height, since I can kinda tell I'm getting taller by the fact I'm seeing some of you without needing to look up anymore? And what do you mean, probably? Yoichi sighed and cleared his throat to gain Izuku's attention, which he did. By the looks of it, your eyes and hair color have changed to blue instead of green, which is rather interesting. Maybe it might be because Toshinori was your direct predecessor, so maybe some of his traits like eye color were passed down to you. It's quite fascinating actually. Izuku tried to calm himself and gulped before he nodded his head. Okay, is there anything else? Nana walked up closer to him and looked him over. Your freckles have faded a lot to the point you won't notice them unless you're right in your face. Izuku initially blushed at the close contact but understood she was doing this to help him. Not long after, she backed up and looked him up and down. It seems you're gaining more muscle mass too. That's interesting. Wonder why that is. I'd suggest you ask your doctor when you get out of here. The ninth gave a nod and felt something else. It was like his muscles had torn and then mended, but they repeated to do so over and over again. It felt dreadfully painful but soon went away, and along came a new feeling that made him feel almost weightless. Scratch that he was weightless as he started to float up into the air, but unlike Nana, who had to gain core muscles and use momentum to direct where she flew, he could direct it with his thoughts, which confused Nana, but Yoichi explained it could be the work of one for all, improving her quirk for him, and it may do the same to the others like he mentioned before. This conversation about quirks evolving went on for a bit as Izuku got somewhat control over his new flight abilities, but the conversation stopped abruptly as energy formed around Izuku's eyes and shot out into the void. It surprised them all because at first it looked like Banjo's whips, but soon changed to a laser beam that lost all the black but kept the red. Holy shit, how do I stop? Izuku yelled out, panicking. Banjo, shaking himself out of his stupor, ran over and placed a hand on his shoulder. Alright, you gotta relax, kid, and will it to shut off. Think of it like a on and off switch in your head, all you gotta do is flip it off. Izuku was still distraught but tried his best to listen to his predecessor and willed the beams to go away. It took longer than he wanted, but he got it under control after a while of trying. Gasping and panting, Izuku laid exhausted after that, but he didn't have time to rest as his eyes began to burn slightly. Rubbing them, he realized he was looking through his hand and was able to see his bones. It freaked him out at first, but when he turned to address it he looked right at Nana. But since he tried turning his new X-ray vision off, he accidentally weakened it to the point he could only see through clothes, in this case Nana's clothes. Drip drip drip. Nana quirked a brow as she looked at the ninth user of One for All. Izuku, your nose is bleeding, you doing alright? Izuku didn't respond as his eyes trailed from her chest down to her nether region, where he immediately fainted and fell backwards. Nana, seeing this, looked down at herself, wondering if she forgot to zip up her costume or something, but it wasn't, so she was confused. Hikage, however, figured this was his danger sense on a new level. If he was right, Izuku had enhanced senses, and in this case his eyes evolved to have X-ray vision. He pitched this idea to the others, making a few laugh and Nana to blush and look away, finding her cape rather interesting. A few minutes later Izuku woke up and immediately blushed at remembering what he saw. He made sure to mentally turn off his new X-ray vision and noticed a few more new adaptations, which were super hearing and that his lungs felt full even when he didn't breath, probably meaning he didn't need to breath as much or could possibly stay underwater for long periods of time without needing to resurface like a whale. The rest of his time in One for All was basically the same, with him finding more powers and testing and getting a handle on them. His favorite though was the healing and invulnerability, which from what the past users theorized was One for All, taking in account of his unusually high rate of injuries. That last part irritated him a bit. It wasn't like he wanted to always get hurt, but he just always found himself in situations where he had to protect someone or himself. However, after a while he started to feel like he was fading, and the others noticed he was slowly disappearing from inside the quirk and waking up. Nana went and wrapped him up in a hug before he disappeared. Don't worry, you're just waking up, kid. Now when you get out, tell Toshinori, and if you can go and talk to those girls you have crushes on, that'd be great too. And remember confidence and being true to yourself and act natural. Girls hate false bravado. Izuku blushed at feeling her well-developed body against his, but agreed nonetheless. Yes ma'am, I'll keep what we talked about in mind. With that said he faded completely, leaving them all to themselves once more. It was quiet for a moment until Banjo spoke up. I still can't believe the kid got a full view of the Banshee in the buff. Kid's gonna enjoy that memory for his whole life, I bet ya. Nana, in a mere second, Superman punched the bald bastard and continued to pummel him and ignoring his screams as she did so. All the while the others looked away, trying not to get noticed by the obviously furious woman. 2 days after the summer camp attack, the newly colored eyes of Izuku Midoriya opened, showing the brand new blue hue. They also showed how groggy he was from waking up after a couple days of being unconscious. He pushed himself up and grabbed his head. After a second he shook away the stiffness and he looked around, noticing his surroundings. He was in a hospital room and he was currently alone. Not waiting for someone or calling a nurse, using the call button he got out of the bed and walked towards the bathroom. Finding he had no muscle fatigue, he made it to his destination easily enough, but when he looked in the mirror he was shocked. He was a lot more different from how he used to be. The color of his hair and eyes he knew already, but the fat on his face had slimmed down and his muscles, now looking at them, were similar to Ida, if not a little slimmer. One thing he kinda missed was his freckles. They were always there his whole life, but now they were just gone. It felt weird to see himself with them gone. Well, faint, but they were practically gone with how faint they were now. Sighing, he went to the toilet and used it. After he was done he washed his hands and left the bathroom, walking right into someone. He caught the person and helped them stay up. I'm sorry I didn't notice anyone come in. The person was none other than Momo Yaoyorozu, who wasn't alone as a good chunk of his class was also there. He could guess the others either weren't ready to get out of the hospital or had gone home to their worried families. Oh no, we thought this was our classmate's room. It's entirely our fault, but it is strange, I could have sworn the nurse said this was his room," said the beautiful Ravenet. Izuku chuckled at this and nodded. "Sorry, but you were in the right place, Yaoyorozu-san. It's me, Midoriya. I just went through something and my quirk changed my appearance a bit." Momo along with the others gasped at this and looked him up and down. Kaminari, who was next to a very jealous Mineta, couldn't help himself and said, "Dude, you're jacked. Well, more than usual since you were already pretty muscly before, but this is just, damn man. And why is your hair and eyes blue?" Izuku nervously rubbed the back of his head as he explained, "I'm not that much different really. Sure, I'm taller and have more muscle, but I'm still me, guys. Still the same Izuku Midoriya you guys went to class with and train with." One of the people in the crowd of classmates walked up and looked Izuku up and down. This was none other than Kyoka Jiro, who had a bandage on her forehead and a band-aid on her cheek, so the same guy who would get embarrassed from being next to a girl. Or did you finally grow a little confidence to even let a girl touch you without apologizing and or fainting? All Might's secret successor Grimace, he wasn't that bad. Okay, maybe just a little, but seriously, there are plenty of guys who have problems communicating or just being with women. Yes, that one, but many have the same problem when it comes to interacting with women, so it's not like I'm the only one with that problem. Kyoka rolled her eyes and smirked. Maybe, but I prefer you the way you are, you big nerd. Now I'm pretty sure we all came here for more than to come see you, so Kirishima, step up and explain or I'm hitting you with my jacks. Kirishima did just that, and in front of the crowd, he explained the situation and how he wanted to go and help Bakugo with the tracker they had from Momo's quick thinking during the attack. Izuku, after hearing the plan, hummed and nodded that the plan, for however simple it was, could work, but before he could say his answer, Iida and Sue stepped forward to express their opposition. "Midoriya, you and I both know this should be left to the pros. They have the situation handled, and if we interfere it could possibly endanger Bakugo more than help him." The blue-haired glasses-wearing teenager known as Iida made a valid point, but Sue really brought it together in her statement, and it's highly illegal and could get you all hurt if you're not careful. The newly evolved teen gave their words thought and agreed to a degree. Sure, it was illegal, but if they wore disguises it may just work. But then again, he was the only one with complete invulnerability besides Kirishima, so he and his shark-toothed friend needed to be more thoughtful of the others. Looking over the group, he thought of who had the best quirks and abilities to escape if necessary. After a few more moments he came to a decision. "All right, I say we do this, but only if we play it smart. Those like me and Kirishima can go because we have invulnerability, and yeah, that's a new evolution of my quirk with a bit more to it, but it's too much to explain right now, so we'll leave it at that. Other than that, Yaoyorozu, Jiro, Iida, Shoto and possibly Hagakure, if she thinks she's up to it, would be the most likely to be effective and or escape the area if need be." The room went silent for a while after this, but those who were mentioned were in deep thought. Most were on board, but a few had problems with it. Hagakure shook her head. "I'm sorry, Midoriya, but I'm not comfortable with going. It may be cowardly of me, but I don't think I would bring much to the team and would be more of a deadweight than a pushing force to the team." Izuku turned and saw Hagakure giving the beautiful blondish green-haired girl a nod of understanding. It took a moment for him to realize that he actually saw her, not just her clothes but her face and hair, everything. His eyes were wide and he blinked in surprise. "Wow, I didn't think you'd be so pretty, Hagakure-san." Toru Hagakure tilted her head curiously hearing this before saying, I don't think my clothes are any different that you've seen me in, Midoriya, but thank you." Izuku, realizing the misunderstanding, cleared his throat embarrassed. "That's not what I meant. I can see you. Like actually see you. You have pale skin and pretty eyes. Your hair is also pretty too, with its vibrant coloring. It's kinda greenish blonde with purple highlights." Toru knew immediately that Izuku was telling the truth. She doesn't remember what she looked like, but from the pictures of herself as a baby she knows the color of her hair, and what he just described was exactly how it looked. She covered her mouth in shock before it registered, and she couldn't help but hug the ninth user. "Please tell me what else. Do I still have the mole under my left eye? Do I look pretty and cute like Uraraka, or more elegant and dignified like Yaoyorozu?" Izuku blinked along with the others, who were super surprised by this new revelation. Izuku before his mind registered it his mouth went on autopilot. Yes, it's still there, and I'd say you look more like Uraraka but have a very pretty face similar to Yaoyorozu's. I didn't mean to say that. Not that you're both not pretty but that I didn't mean to speak my mind. Yaoyorozu was blushing up a storm along with Toru, who was for the first time complimented on her appearance. Izuku was stuck in between a rock and a hard place now as the entire room looked at him. Jiro grinned evilly and slapped his shoulder. Looks like you've grown a lot more than in height and muscle. Seems you've finally grown a pair, and I like that. Maybe now you could start flirting with cute girls. Izuku coughed on his own spit and sputtered, I can't just go around flirting with girls like you, Jiro-san. Girls like me? Asked Jiro with a deadly look in her eyes. Izuku, not wanting the Kaminari treatment and totally forgetting his invulnerability, quickly replied, girls like you and Momo who are really super pretty. He blushed more at being forced to say what he thought about the two girls liked it but tried not to show it. That was until Yaoyorozu's voice was heard. I believe we're talking about saving Bakugo, not flirting with Midoriya, Kyoka-chan. Kyoka shrugged. What, can't a girl admire a handsome guy? Besides, it's not like I'm the only one drooling over him. I saw you legit drool as you looked at him after he caught you. At hearing this, Izuku stammered and Momo gasped, I was not. And even if I was, why would you point it out? Kyoka rolled her eyes. Obviously because it's fun to see your reactions. I mean, just looking at you makes me smile. From behind her, Kaminari snorted, more like smirked like a maniac. A sharp jab of her jacks to Kaminari's ears were her response, after which the room started to talk about the plan in more detail. The group decided it would be Izuku, Kirishima, Momo, Iida and Kyoka. The rest weren't going but gave their support, and not long after a doctor and Izuku's mother Inko came into the room. Izuku said bye to his friends and that he'd meet up with them later. When he turned, he saw his mother, who was obviously surprised by his new looks but shook them off, just being happy that her son was safe and sound. The doctor who did his medical scan was heavily surprised by the new invulnerability and even more by the demonstration of his flight and other abilities. The doctor eagerly documented each and every ability in detail and updates his quirk registry for him. It took a while because of all of the test, but by the time it was all over, Izuku was a bit mentally tired. It didn't help that his mother kept looking at him strangely. Mom, why are you looking at me like that? Inko sighed deeply. It's just, with your newly gained invulnerability and all these other new powers, it feels a little ridiculous to worry about you, but I just can't help it. Izuku couldn't help it and smiled at his mother, giving her a soft nod. I sorta understand. Just a few days ago I was training to take punches and improve my overall toughness, and now I realize all those heavy punches to my stomach were for nothing. Inko giggled. Yes, I could see how all of that could be wasted. But it also is a little funny. Izuku laughed and gave a bright smile. Yup, can't deny that. Say, have you talked with Auntie Mitsuki? You know, since Katsuki has been taken. His mother sighed at this and looked downcast. I have, but her and Matsuru aren't taking it too well. Strangely enough, Matsuru is the one who's pissed off while Mitsuki is simply worried sick. Izuku stayed silent, wondering if he should tell his mother about he and his friend's plans. He pondered it for a moment until he was brought out of his thoughts by Inko. Izuku, I know what you and your friends are planning. I overheard you while in the hallway. Oh, by the way, which one of those girls are you interested in, because it sounded like you were flirting with two or more of them? The one for all. User paled and facepalmed as his cheeks burned red. I sorta like one or two of them and maybe a few more, but I don't think anything will become of it. I mean, they're all great and amazing while I'm just me. His mother's smile turned to a frown as she sighed. You definitely get your self-doubt from me, that's for sure, but ignore that feeling or voice, Izuku. Any of those girls would be lucky to be with my little superhero. Inko then caressed his cheek while giving him a stern look. You've never noticed, but when it comes to protecting people you're like a different person. You sort of remind me of All Might in a way. So don't let self-doubt get you down, and remember that the part of you that makes you super isn't your quirk, but your heart. The newly blue-haired boy smiled in return and placed his hand over hers. Thanks, Mom, I needed that. But does that mean you're okay with me and my friends going to help Katsuki? Inko frowned for a second before nodding. I'm not particularly happy with it, but I can't stop you. It's in your nature to help people, even those who don't treat you right. Just be careful and protect your friends. I promise, Mom, and I'll make you proud, and maybe if you could go get Yaoyorozu to make me some clothes since I don't think my old stuff fits anymore, I'd appreciate it. Inko giggled and covered her mouth. Oh, of course, and I'd like to get to know my future daughter-in-law. M-O-O-O-O-M-M-M-M, exclaimed Izuku as his mother walked out the room. Our main protagonist had just said goodbye to his mother as she drove off back to the Bakugo residence. He was glad she understood the situation and let him do what he was going to do, but now all he felt was the full seriousness of what he was going into. He and his friends were going into a villain raid to find their classmate, and said villains were the very same who attacked and almost killed them on multiple occasions at this point. It was daunting, but Izuku wouldn't dare buckle under such little pressure. He had done things much more dangerous than this with even littler odds of getting out safely. So with a deep breath and exhale he turned and met eye contact with his group. Momo and the others had just walked up to him and he was filled with determination. The others noticed and in turn were a bit surprised but soon found their own resolve. They all quickly moved in the direction of a clothing store and each got a disguise. Izuku actually didn't need to, since the clothes he got from Momo and the new looks were probably enough to disguise himself, although he was curious on why Momo made him the clothes she did. She had made him some blue jeans, red boots and a blue long-sleeve shirt with some strange symbol on the front that he didn't recognize. In all, no one would question it because of how it pretty much blended in, as if he was your average hero fan or something. Well, mostly blended in, as he soon noticed. After everyone came out in disguise he saw how most had jackets or even a turtleneck in Kyoka's case. That's when he looked around and saw that the people around him all wore cold weather clothes. But for some reason he didn't feel the cold. He wasn't even chilly. In fact, it was probably due to some sort of invulnerability to harsh weather. Maybe it was part of his new abilities he didn't notice yet, since some were more subtle than others. Apparently he wasn't the only one to notice as Kyoka walked up to him and placed a hand under his shirt. Huh, you're pretty warm and snug under just a long sleeve. Is that another ability or something? Blushing at the contact of Kyoka's hands directly on his abs he gulped. I think so, but without testing I won't say it is or isn't. Kyoka gave a soft hum to this and laced his hand with hers, causing Momo to pout and the other guys to tilt their heads in confusion. Only Kirishima had a clue of what was happening but wasn't sure, since he didn't see the pair as compatible until now, since he rarely saw them interact with each other. Huh, guess Midobro is good at getting girls, maybe a little too good if Yaoyorozu's pout is saying anything. Thought the red-haired shark boy. Momo Yaoyorozu was unsure why her heart felt a pang as her best friend held hands with Izuku, and absent-mindedly went over to the two and grabbed Izuku's other unoccupied hand, making the guys except Kirishima even more confused. Clearing her throat, Momo spoke up. I believe the saying is, sharing is caring. It would be rather rude to not help warm up our hands, Midoriya-kun. Izuku blinked in disbelief but went along with the request. Sure, I'm okay with it, but don't you two feel awkward holding hands with someone like me? Kyoka rolled her eyes at hearing this. If by someone like you mean a handsome guy who is a perfect gentleman, then yes, I think we'd like to hold your hand and absolutely won't mind if it's you. In fact, I think Yaomomo and I would especially like it if it was you holding our hands. Momo, still feeling strange in her heart but now slightly different, agreed with her purple-haired friend. I must full-heartedly agree. I personally would love it if you held my hand more often, if that's okay with you, Midoriya-kun. The ninth user Simple shook his head in agreement. Well, if you're both okay with it, then sure, I'd hold you hands if you ask, but I think it's time we start walking since we're becoming a public spectacle. Indeed, apparently having two girls fawned over one handsome-looking young man would gain the attention of others, to the point some even started taking pictures and videos of them. Sadly, this would have unknowing effects in the future. With so much attention on the group, they all ran off and started on their way to the marker on the GPS. It took them a while, but they soon arrived at what seemed to be a warehouse in the industrial district. Problem was, it was nearly morning by now with how late when Izuku was released and met up with his friends. The little shopping trip just took more time out of their little operation. Yet thankfully the raid, from what Momo heard, was being conducted in the morning to catch the villains off guard. This also meant they needed to be quick and spot Bakugo as soon as possible to be able to get him out. The group walked towards the building with Izuku using his X-ray vision to see into the building. What he saw made him grimace, which was noticed by Kyoka. What is it, Beefcake? You sense something off. Izuku didn't blush at the nickname since he was in his more serious persona. I used one of my new powers, that being X-ray vision, and looked into the warehouse and it's super not good. Kyoka and the others perked up looking towards him to explain. When he noticed their looks he sighed and told them what he saw. I see tanks with nomus like the ones at the training camp, Hosu incident in the USJ, but no Bakugo. Kirishima growled in frustration and hit the side of the wall while Shoto patted his shoulder in comfort. Izuku wasn't too far behind Kirishima in anger, but he knew he needed to keep a cool head and continue to search the building with his X-ray vision. It was a few minutes later that due to his enhanced senses Izuku heard an explosion at least halfway across the city and he saw heroes come on scene to most likely raid the warehouse. He turned and instructed his friends, "Alright, act natural, and if something happens just keep calm and we'll move to cover." He earned nods from the others and they all watched as the warehouse was raided. However, not long after, just a couple minutes in, the warehouse exploded, throwing shrapnel everywhere. No one was hurt due to Mount Lady think swiftly by blocking the debris with her enlarged body, but the situation soon worsened as the League of Villains were teleported through a goo-like matter. Izuku could hear the others curse beneath their breath and he couldn't help but agree with some of them. This was looking to be a shit show in the making, and right in the center of it was their Bakugo. The group moved to cover behind a concrete wall and Izuku started forming a plan in his mind. His mind moved extremely fast, but all the planning he did was for naught as a new challenger entered the fray. A tall man in a suit and black mask appeared and started mocking and fighting the heroes. This was pretty bad, but what was worse was the sheer pressure the man emitted, striking fear in everyone there. "What All for One looks like? Ah, heroes are here as well. Since you're all here uninvited, I might as well give you all a good welcome," said the menacing figure. The man shot his hand forward and sharp red and black tendrils exploded out of his fingertips, heading straight for the heroes. Most dodged, but Mount Lady wasn't able to as she shielded civilians and police in the area. The giantess fell to her knees with blood leaking from her arms and some more smaller cuts along her abdomen. The heroes like Kamui Woods and Best Genus tried their best to fight the man off, but it was to no avail as he systematically defeated them all using an arsenal of quirks. "Now that the heroes are dealt with, I believe we still have business to attend to. Bakugo, I'm still waiting on an answer if you join me in my league," said the man. Izuku and his group gulped in fear and awaited Bakugo's answer. Unpredictably, the blonde bomber raised his middle finger towards the black-clad man and yelled out, "Fuck you, I'm not joining some daddy-issue group. And besides, I bet you all talk about your feelings and shit and that just ain't for me." Everyone's sweat dropped at this, but the man just laughed and held his hand out. "What a pity, but at least you'll be remembered as someone who made me laugh. Goodbye, young man." Just before he could attack, All Might came flying in out of nowhere, striking the man with a Carolina smash. However, the fist was caught and the man simply spoke as if nothing happened. "Oh, All Might, I see you've grown old. It would have taken you about half the time to get here if you were still in your prime, and that punch was pathetically weak." All Might just glared before speaking. "I could say the same for you All for One. It should have taken you at least another 10 minutes of monologuing before you started killing the people around you." All for One simply smiled under his mask and threw All Might away with an air wall. "That may be, but in age comes wisdom, but you were never the wise type, so I'd say you're the senile sort of old man." The number one hero landed and jumped back into the battle with a punch to the shield, causing All for One to be pushed back slightly. "You're one to say someone's old, you damn fossil." As the two titans duked it out, Bakugo was surrounded by the League, giving him no time to escape unless he wished to be captured or heavily injured, but lucky for him he had a classmate who with his newly increased strength could now move faster than the eye could see. In a blue blur, Bakugo disappeared and reappeared behind the concrete wall where the heroes in training were hiding behind. The blonde, after realizing where he was, tried to proclaim his surprise but didn't get time to speak as he knelt forward and vomited from the speed he had moved in such little time without preparing for it. "Ack, why you sons of bitches, warn a bastard next time." Izuku grimaced and patted his childhood friend's back. "Sorry, I didn't really get time to warn you, and we kinda need to move, so we need to get going before they find us." Wait, who the hell are?" Bakugo started to say but was cut off as Izuku moved again, getting him and the rest of the group out of there and into an alley about a few miles away. This time all of them clenched their stomachs and a few, like Bakugo, Kirishima and Kyoka, vomited in nearby trash cans. Izuku, seeing this, sucked in through his teeth as he felt sorry for his companions, but he also knew it was for the best to get out of there as quickly as they could, so didn't say anything. It also dawned on him that maybe he didn't need to take so many of them with him in one go, but that train of thought was for another time, because right now he had to console a pissed-off Kyoka who started jabbing him with her jacks on high volume. "You fucking himbo, what the hell was that for?" she yelled at him. Izuku simply raised his arms, not even feeling the jacks hit him. Besides the small shakes his skin felt. Sorry, but we really needed to get out of there, and that was the quickest way without getting noticed. Even so, warn us like Bakugo said, next time or no more flirting for you. The purple-haired girl exclaimed. The ninth one for all user simply tilted his head and asked, "Wait, you're gonna continue flirting with me?" Kyoka facepalmed and groaned. That's the thing he gets caught up on. "Oh whatever, let's just get out of this alley, it stinks of vomit." From behind her, Kirishima sickly apologized, "Sorry." Kyoka huffed and walked out the alley, dragging Momo and Izuku with her, and the others shakily followed behind. Walking for a bit, they stopped and were now in underneath of a massive TV depicting the fight between All Might and All for One. From the looks of things it had gotten worse and the League was nowhere in sight. The man in black however remained and was putting up a good fight against the symbol of peace. They watched on as the number one hero struggled to fight his arch-nemesis and was even forced to undo his transformation, making almost everyone besides Izuku gasp in shock and surprise. The news anchor watching it all couldn't help herself as she commented how the fight was not looking good in favor of All Might. Our protagonist clenched his hands anxiously, knowing that this was not going to end well. The fact All Might's weakened form was revealed was already bad enough, with the ramifications and the things he thought of made Izuku worry even more for the future after this fight. All Might Sensei is in deep trouble, he's out of time and his body is failing him. If things come down to it, I'm going to have to step in and save him. Laws be damned, I will not let my mentor die to All for One's hands, but will All for One stoop low and reveal One for All. It would demoralize the public and maybe even put a target out for myself, even if he doesn't know it's I who hold it," thought the successor of the number one hero. The fight continued on until All Might was forced back and in front of a civilian woman who had been trapped under rubble. All Might was barely able to stand and watched on as his nemesis approached him with his arm fully imbued with quirks. Momo and Kyoka went to grab a hold of Izuku's arm for comfort, but to their surprise he was gone. But the slight breeze they felt told the story of what happened, and the reality of it was about to hit them. "Kyoka, where did Izuku go?" "He was right here," asked the Ravenet. The purple-haired girl went wide-eyed and replied, "I don't know, he was right here a second ago, you don't think?" The half-said question caused Momo to pale and turn to the screen in anticipation along with Kyoka. The boys in the group noticed how tense they were and on seeing them there but Izuku missing, they all figured what was happening and turned back to watch the screen in just as much worry. With All Might and All for One, the strongest villain in history simply stared at the disheveled and weak-looking All Might with the sockets that once held his eyes. "Look at how much you've fallen. To think the great and mighty All Might has become a shell of his former self, all due to my attack all those years ago." All Might couldn't retort as his mouth was filled with blood. He could hear the woman behind him begging him for help and he was powerless to do so. He felt like a failure. Here he was against his most hated enemy and he could do nothing but stand shakily on his legs like a skeleton propped up on strings, and to make it worse the bastard in front of him was monologuing like a textbook villain. If he could he would punch the bastard or even spit in his face if it didn't shoot pain through his body, but just as he thought this the villain's words finally struck him out of his thoughts. "Say, your successor. Do you believe he's capable of fighting me in your stead? Because this is rather boring. What was the kid's name again?" He put a hand to his chin in thought before smiling and proclaiming, "Ah yes, how could I forget? His name is Izuku Midoriya if I'm not correct." All Might went wide-eyed but soon clenched his teeth. It seemed All for One wasn't just going to kill him but put pressure on young Midoriya by outing him as his successor and pupil, all by broadcasting it through the news helicopter above them as they recorded the fight. "Leave him out of this, All for One. He's not ready yet to face someone like you, and even if he was I'd still like to get my punches into that ugly mug of yours," said Toshinori with his eyes lit aflame. The news anchor in the helicopter watching and recording this all couldn't help but speak on the matter to those watching. "You've heard it here, folks at home. It appears that All Might, our beloved number one hero, has a student to replace him by the name of Izuku Midoriya. If my memory is correct, the same boy was recently in the sports festival and from a recently uploaded video on HeroTube has fought not only the hero killer Stain but also the mass murder Muscular." Those watching were shocked to hear this. but none more than Izuku's friends and mother who were watching from their homes. The group he went with on the street were just as shocked, to the point Bakugo dropped his angry face for one of surprise. Inko actually fainted after sputtering, and it was only due to Mitsuki and Masaru Bakugo for catching her, although even they had to give each other surprised looks due to their own bewilderment. All for One hummed at Toshinori, putting his hand to his chin once again. "So you admitted it. I thought I'd have to bring up how long you've been training him, but I guess that was for naught. It'll be entertaining how the boy reacts to your dead corpse in my hands when I go and visit him after this. I can't wait to see his expression of horror and maybe take a picture to look at after I dispose of him." The number 1 villain powered up his arm with multiple quirks, even more, about to finally end the 8th user of his brother's accursed quirk. "Say hello to Nana for me, and tell her how much of a failure you were for failing your student just as she had." All Might tried to pour one for all into his arm to block, but the quirk was past the point of being embers and were now ash in the wind, so with a small sad smile he said his last words. "I'm sorry Midoriya, I hope you can move past this and grow stronger than I could ever imagine." The fist of All for One shot forward and the villain flew towards his enemy with a sick and demented smile on his face. "Goodbye All Might." Toshinori closed his eyes awaiting the impact, and all those watching held their breath, horrified by what they were seeing. Many prayed for a miracle to save their beloved hero. WHCH felt so foreign for them to do. And yet it appeared that those prayers were heard as a miracle happened. All for One, who was flying towards Toshinori, was hit midair and sent sailing into a few buildings and finally stopped after landing in an overturned apartment complex. Toshinori opened his eyes after a few seconds of not feeling any pain, when he saw a tall muscular young man with blue hair and eyes similar to his own floating similarly to his mentor Nana. He was unsure if he had died or not. But how the young man turned towards him and flew over, hugging him in a tight embrace, he somehow knew it was real. The cherry on top was when the very recognizable voice of his successor came from the young man. "All Might Sensei, I made it just in time. Are you okay? Do you need me to get you medical attention?" Toshinori was confused for a moment until he realized that the boy in front of him was his successor and student. "Why, young Midoriya? How do you look like this, and what in Kami's name are you doing here?" Izuku rubbed his neck nervously as he sheepishly explained. "It's complicated, but basically my quirk evolved and changed my appearance a bit, along with giving me new abilities to go along with my super strength. And as for why I'm here, well, it's a hero's job to meddle where he's not supposed to, right? You taught me that, and I won't let your teachings go to waste, especially when it means saving your life in the process." Toshinori couldn't believe what he was hearing, but after a moment formed a soft smile. "I did a good job teaching you about what it means to be a hero, but maybe I did too good of a job. You do know you'll be in big trouble after this, right, young man?" The 9th user grimaced a little bit, gave a reaffirming nod. "I know, and I'll take any punishment placed on me, but I think we have bigger things to worry about at the moment." Turning around, Izuku and All Might saw All for One coming out of the rubble of the building he was flung into and brushing the dirt from his suit. "Ah, the successor arrives just to die with his master, how very touching." Izuku glared and started to float off the ground. Strong words coming from a man whose face looks like the potatoes I peeled a few days ago. All for One hummed before he clapped. "Now that's surprising. From my reports on you, you're supposed to be a weak, stammering little boy. I wonder where all this bravado is coming from." The teen just crossed his arms, looking the villain with a stern expression. "Well, like my mother told me, don't let self-doubt get me down, and remember that the part that makes me super isn't my quirk, but my heart." The villain just groaned hearing this. "That has to be the corniest thing I've ever heard, and I've had that blonde buffoon as a nemesis, so I'm an expert of corny hero talk at this point." Izuku couldn't help it as he blushed a little but held his ground. "Then it seems the time for talk has ended. I'm putting you in bars for my master and all those before him." Those watching couldn't believe why they were seeing. The same boy they heard was All Might's student was about to face off against the very same man who beat the number 1 hero with no sign of fear. At this moment many across the world started to hope again and began believing in Izuku Midoriya, the boy who faced off against the strongest villain with absolute resolve and will. All for One smiled and replied to the boy with his arms spread out in a taunting manner. "Then come face your death, let's see how you compare to your sensei." The two started their fight with Izuku flying in and punching the villain back into the building he was previously smacked into, but this time Izuku followed behind to deliver a combo of punches that shook the earth beneath them. The ground broke apart and the building was turned into rubble in just a few punches. However, All for One was able to force Izuku back with a concussive blast from his palms, shooting the blue-haired boy into the air, just barely missing the news helicopter. The villain used a spring quirk to jump up towards the young man and delivered a haymaker to his gut with his hand that turned into a spiked club, but to the villain's surprise Izuku didn't budge or seem hurt at all by the attack and retaliated with his heat vision, blasting him into a crater. It took a moment for All for One to get out of the crater and smirked viciously. "Nicely done, boy, but it's quite shocking to see how that quirk of yours has evolved. It also reminds me of my own, if in a smaller scale due to only having a couple abilities, though a quirk that belonged to my very own brother would of course be somewhat similar if you think about it." The world watching all in unison gasped hearing this new revelation. To think the boy who trained under All Might had the same quirk of the villain he was now fighting. It was sort of poetic in a horrific, deranged way. Izuku didn't respond as he dove down at what he could only think was 100 miles per hour, slamming his feet into the villain's chest and holding him down with his strength. He then started pummeling the 100-year-old villain into the crater, making the hole deeper and shaking the entire city. This went on for a few good seconds before All for One used a earth-shaping quirk to punt Izuku off of him and into an adjacent building that was still barely standing. The villain, after regaining a bit of his cognition, used a boosting quirk along with a metal manipulation quirk and telekinesis quirk to force the building to collapse in on itself with the boy still inside until all that was left was a giant metal sphere. "Ha! That shows you, brat. For a user of my brother's quirk you did pretty well, but even All Might in his prime wouldn't be able to get out of that without going past his limits, so I know you won't be able to escape." Izuku, who was inside the ball, grunted me groaned as he struggled to escape. The villain's words didn't matter. If people needed him he'd go beyond his limits and succeed, and now that he knew he needed more power he'd stop holding back like he currently was. The villain turned to the helicopter to gloat about his victory over the boy. A creaking sound could be heard, but it was too faint for anyone to hear. "Do you see this, Japan? Even your last hope failed to defeat me. The boy who had the number 1 hero's quirk passed on to him failed, and now you have no one left to face me. But don't worry. I won't kill you all as I need subjects to rule over." It was then that a loud creaking of metal was heard from the giant metal sphere. Turning back towards the ball of metal that used to be the building, cracks could be seen forming throughout it and the world looked on in amazement. "Well shit," exclaimed All for One before the ball of metal broke apart and Izuku zoomed toward him and grabbed the collar of his suit. In seconds Izuku dragged the villain high up into the air but didn't stop until they reached the atmosphere, where Izuku planned to go all out on the villain. All for One had burn marks around his body that he was struggling to heal, as he also needed to focus on healing his brain from the lack of oxygen and pressure put on his body. It was finally now that he understood why the boy took him here. Izuku was just fine and hadn't needed to take a breath at all. But he knew that fight wasn't over yet and not to underestimate his opponent, so with an idea in his head he flew around the earth in circles, causing immense pressure and heat on the villain, causing his bones to break and the very clothes and skin of his body to burn and char. This continued until the villain was a smoking husk and unconscious from having no oxygen to breath, and with his brain not focused on heal anymore he was soundly defeated. It wasn't the most pretty of battles in Izuku's opinion, but when facing someone like this he needed to use any advantage he could. Izuku, after seeing the state the villain was in, flew back down towards Japan and landed right where All Might was being taken care of by medics and an ambulance. Izuku dropped the villain's body to the broken floor, earning a groan of pain from the body. Kinda expected that to be harder. But then again, no one can live in the vacuum of space and then be deprived of oxygen and flown around the atmosphere to burn for very long. Even with healing quirks he'd be hard-pressed to fight back or think of a solution during all that pain. Toshinori just glanced at the body of his nemesis and blinked at how easy it was for his successor to kick the utter shit out of him, and from the hell that was his student's explanation of how he defeated him, even All Might felt sorta bad for how the villain was pummeled. Young Midoriya, don't you think that was a little cruel?" asked Toshinori, nudging the body with his foot, earning a grunt. Izuku just shrugged after thinking it over. "Not really. I mean, he has regenerative quirks and could have faked being unconscious or something, so I didn't wanna have a villain like him to trick us and end up hurting people, and even then I wasn't sure if it was wise to go all out in a city and cause more collateral damage." All those watching facepalmed or sweat dropped at how absurd the situation turned into. At one moment they were watching their beloved #1 hero fight for his life, but now they watched that very same man's student basically dismantle the villain who was terrorizing them and revealed lots of secrets. It didn't take that long for a few police officers and heroes to arrive on scene and help cuff All for One and start helping the people who were trapped in the destruction of the battle. All Might, now looking at his successor, noticed a new jarring detail he had missed as he was too preoccupied with how terrible All for One looked. "Midoriya, my boy, I think you should go home for the time being." Izuku turned and tilted his head at his sensei. "Why's that, All Might sensei?" Toshinori blushed and turned away with a grimace. "Well, to put it simply, you sorta burned off all your clothes and are now standing naked with the news helicopter still recording you." Quote. Wait, what? Looking down at himself, Izuku found that he was indeed naked, and after looking up saw mostly everyone looking or turning away awkwardly. Those few looking at him were a female reporter and Mount Lady, who were both giving him admiring looks. "Oh, crap," spoke the boy as his entire body glowed in a deep blush. Izuku, in a blur of speed, flew out of Kamino and towards his home, all the while mentally berating himself. "Oh Kami. They saw everything and I didn't even notice." In a second he arrived at the front door of his apartment and fumbled with the spare key to enter. After unlocking and opening the door, he dashed inside, closing and locking it behind him. He ran towards his room looking for clothes but remembered he outgrew them all. "Shoot, I'll have to borrow some of Dad's old ones." Going towards his mother's room, in a towel he wrapped around his waist, he retrieved some old dusty clothes from when his dad was still alive. They were more formal than he would have liked, but a button-up shirt and dress pants were a lot better than nothing. After dressing himself, he went and fell face first into the couch, letting out a deep exhausted groan. "I can't believe my luck. First Bakugo gets captured and One for All's relationship to that villain were revealed, then my fight with that villain, and now this. Can my luck get any worse?" Ding dong rang the doorbell. "Oh, you've gotta be kidding me," exclaimed the poor teen in an emotionally tired voice. Getting up from the couch, he used his X-ray vision to see through the door. This allowed him to see a few reporters and cameramen. All Izuku could do was pale at the sight. "How did they find out where I live already? The fight literally just ended." He wasn't able to panic for long as shouting could be heard, and when he looked through the door again he saw his mother holding back his Auntie Mitsuki from kicking the asses of the nosy reporters. Quote. Huh, what good timing in their part. "Oh God, I'm getting a scolding from Auntie Mitsuki. I'd rather deal with the reporters than that," the blue-haired boy cried out dramatically. The door soon opened and in came Bakugo's parents along with Inko. They entered into the apartment's living room where they saw Izuku sitting with a pale face. "Hi Auntie, Uncle, what brings you to our home on short notice?" Mitsuki rolled her eyes at the question before going over and smacking Izuku upside the head. It didn't hurt him, but it did make him look down since he didn't wanna hurt her hand by not moving with the smack. "What the hell were you thinking? That was super fucking stupid to fight such a strong villain, and what's this talk about you being All Might's successor or whatever?" yelled the irate blonde. Chuckling nervously to himself, Izuku tried calming the woman down. "Gee, that's a secret between me and All Might sensei, and besides, isn't it better that we go and pick up Kachan before he gets mad that I left him with the others?" Mitsuki just glared at the teenager for a second before conceding. "Fine, we'll get the brat, but once that's over we're going to have a talk with All Might and we're getting answers." Izuku gulped at the woman but nodded in agreement while thinking, "Sorry All Might, but it seems you have one more tough opponent to get through before really retiring. I just hope she goes easy on him." Before much more could be said, a knock was heard at the door. Mitsuki, thinking it was more reporters again, grumbled about stupid vultures and how she'd show them why you don't mess with people and mind their damn business. Stomping towards the door, she opened it with anger burning in her eyes, but that anger went away as soon as she saw the principal of UA, and along with him were a couple heroes, those being Eraserhead, Present Mike, and finally Midnight. The Chimera smiled joyfully at the woman. "Ah, I do believe you're the mother of young Bakugo. It's good to meet you again, but we're here for Midoriya if you could get him for us." Mitsuki narrowed her eyes and crossed her arms. "And what are you gonna do with him?" Aizawa, at hearing this, sighed and explained. "We're merely going to talk to him and bring him to the hospital where All Might is being kept and have reports of your son being it, not only to get him checked out for any injuries but to get answers from both Midoriya and All Might on what exactly is going on." He also grumbled under his breath about the fact the rat probably already knew and just wanted to see the drama of them finding out for themselves, but luckily only a few heard that last part. Mitsuki glared for a moment before sighing and rubbing her head. Fine, but when we get there I get to ask some questions of my own. Nezu gave a nod of understanding. Of course, that is perfectly fine and reasonable. The blonde woman gave a nod and went inside to get the others. When she came out to the door with them, Izuku greeted his teachers apprehensively. Good morning, Midnight Sensei, Mike Sensei and Aizawa Sensei, and hello to you, Principal Nezu. The teachers greeted back in variously different moods. Mike was happy to see the young listener while Aizawa was irritated. Nezu was joyful as usual, and Midnight, well, she had a nosebleed, so that said enough. They exited the apartment complex just to encounter the press right before they got to the car they were taking. A few young reporters charged forward to try and get a scoop on Izuku but were harshly pushed back by Aizawa, who flared his quirk. Get back, this is a minor and you will respect him and his privacy. If you wish for a statement about the Kamino incident, then you'll have to wait for an announcement scheduled for tomorrow, said the rugged-looking teacher. The reporters were still visibly wanting to speak to Izuku, but due to law they couldn't without permission from his legal guardian, and from the looks the adults were giving them they weren't getting said permission. Most left, but some of the more seasoned reporters turned to Nezu for more details on the announcement. One female with lilac skin and black eyes that Izuku found similar to his classmate Mina spoke up. Principal Nezu, when exactly can you estimate the announcement to be made and where, if it's not too much to ask? Nezu turned to the woman and said, if it isn't Miss Chito's Kazuki, I knew you'd come to such a big scoop. To answer your questions, the meeting will be around noon and will be taking place in the front of UA. The now named Chito's gave a nod after writing the information down on a notepad. After she was done, she looked up and said her goodbyes, but not before giving Izuku a calculating look. The reporters soon dispersed and Izuku's group were able to get in the black SUV with Aizawa at the wheel. As the car started and drove off towards the Musudafu hospital, Izuku couldn't help but ponder on the reporter that looked at him strangely. For some reason he felt like she was off in some way, but for the life of him he couldn't pinpoint why he felt that way other than that she was very smart and calculated in nature. He continued to think about her for the rest of the ride to the hospital, finally coming to the conclusion that something was just off with her and he would try and ask Nezu about her since he knew her by name. A little under half an hour later, the blue-haired boy walked into the hospital nervous as most eyes were on him. He even saw a few taking his picture, and for some reason most were girls around his age or women he could only guess were in their 20s. Inko saw this and smiled with tears in her eyes as she addressed Mitsuki. My baby boy has become a heartthrob. Oh, how I remember when he was just a baby going around praising All Might. As the signature Midoriya tears started to fall, Mitsuki patted her friend's back. Oh, don't be like that. I mean, sure, he's become any girl's dream boy with his looks, but that's just him growing up. It also doesn't really help him that he's still the shy kid he was before his quirk evolved or whatever. Girls are probably gonna eat him up if he's not careful. Hearing this just made Inko bawl her eyes out harder, making the entire group sweat drop. But not long after this they approached a group Izuku was all too familiar with, except for a few exceptions. When they saw Izuku and his group, two very angry girls walked over to him and pulled his ear, making him lean down to their levels. The ravenet of the two chastised him. Midoriya, what in the blazes were you thinking, flying off like that and getting involved in the battle of a hero and an extremely dangerous villain? The purple-haired girl asked right after her partner. And why didn't you realize you were naked on live TV sooner? The whole world probably now knows about your butt dimples. Izuku blushed and raised his hands in defense. Sorry Yaomomo-chan, Kyoka-san. I just couldn't help getting involved when it was my sensei and mentor. And as for the whole naked on TV part, well, I actually wish I noticed sooner too, since I was super embarrassed. Momo and Kyoka huffed at his response as if they already expected these answers, and that was probably cause they did with the type of selfless person Izuku was at all times, while also being a giant shy nerd with terrible luck at times. Sighing, Momo let go of his ear along with Kyoka. The taller of the two gave him a stern look and spoke in an even sterner voice. Once we get back to classes, you are not leaving our sides at all unless it's for the bathroom or changing rooms. At this his point, neither of us can trust you not to get in trouble. Izuku paled at this and tried defending himself. I don't get into trouble, all the time. Kyoka raised an eyebrow at this and crossed her arms under her budding bust. Oh really now? Because if my memory is correct, and it damn well as I remember you getting into the sludge villain incident, the entrance exam where you destroyed the zero-pointer and saved Uraraka, the first battle training exercise with Bakugo, the USJ, Stain, the training camp with Kota, and how you fought Muscular, and after which you went to find Bakugo, and now this whole situation. Does that sound like you don't get in trouble wherever you go? Because to me it sure as hell does. Momo nodded to this as she crossed her arms under her much bigger bust, making it prop up a little. Izuku on the other hand was trying to think of a retort and found he had nothing. He sighed, conceding that he may have terrible luck when it came to villains or villain situations. Okay, you have a point and I'll stick by you when we get to class. You happy now? The two girls smiled and nodded before saying in unison, yup, indeed. Just a little ways from the trio were the girls' parents, who each gave their spouse a look of wonder, thinking about if their daughters liked the same boy, because from their angle it sure looked like it. A woman looking similar to Momo walked over to the trio along with a woman looking like an older and more mature version of Kyoka. Once in front of the trio, the one looking like Momo spoke up, getting their attention. Excuse me, young man, I'm Momo-chan's mother, Sariza Yaoyorozu, and over there is my husband, John Yaoyorozu. If it's not too much to ask, are you perhaps my daughter's boyfriend? Yup, made Momo's mother Bayonetta for no other reason than that I could honestly see it being true for some odd reason. The man Izuku looked over to waved, giving a smile too soft for how rugged he looked, but Izuku gave a wave in return before he realized what he was asked and froze in place. Mother, exclaimed Momo as she held her face while blushing a deep red. It was now that the woman looking like Kyoka started speaking. I'd actually like to ask the same. I'm Mikajiro, and my little girl has never acted like this for a guy in my memory. Either she messes with them or straight up mocks them, so this is definitely new for me. Now it was time for Kyoka to get embarrassed and have her Jax cover her face along with her hands. Mom, don't say such things, and don't make me sound like a tomboy. Mika gave her daughter a look and asked, are you really fighting the fact you're a tomboy? If you didn't need to wear a skirt to your school, I know you would be wearing baggy pants, and you can't deny it. Kyoka spoke with her Jax rolled around her index finger. Maybe you're right, but you don't have to make me sound like that while in front of Beefcake. Beefcake, huh? Thought you'd come up with something more original for your boyfriend, but then again it's better than something childish. Spoke Mika while holding her chin. The purple-haired teen groaned dramatically while Momo was still trying to defend that she wasn't in a relationship with Izuku to her mother, who just so happened to poke holes in all her explanations, causing Momo to stop trying entirely. As this was all happening, Izuku was still frozen in shock, making his mother worry a little. Off to the side, she turned to Mitsuki, who simply shook her head before saying, remember how I said girls would eat him up? Well, apparently he's already been trapped, and I don't think he even noticed until now. Wanna go and meet your future in-laws? Inko fainted on the spot, hearing this, making Mitsuki and her husband to catch and drag her over to Katsuki before place her in a chair. While they were at it, they got to greet their son, hugging him as they were reassured he was fine by the boy next to him, who just so happened to be Kirishima, and Mitsuki couldn't help but poke fun at her son. Oh, it's good to see my son has such a nice boyfriend already. Hearing this made Katsuki blush in anger and embarrassment. Damn it, you old hag. In all, it was a rather hectic meeting between all those involved, but Aizawa and the other teachers were used to this sort of chaos by now. After years of teaching rambunctious teens with superpowers, this kind of thing would be expected. Nezu during all of this had gone and spoke to Recovery Girl, who had done the treatment for Toshinori, getting news on his condition and well-being. Her explanation on the fact he could no longer use his quirk, and yet his body was not too injured due to Midoriya's interference before any bad injuries could happen, made the Chimera grateful. In all, it was better than it could have been, which was a miracle in its own right. One of his arms was broken but healed up nicely due to her quirk, and on the way to recovery with more treatments scheduled for the future. In fact, Toshinori was already good enough to walk around and just so happened to be awake already, which would be useful in explaining to the others and Izuku's mother about the boy's quirk and its origin. An hour later, Izuku had gotten to know the two girls' parents and found they were really nice people, especially Momo's father, who since meeting him started calling him son. It was odd at first, but he didn't mind anymore as he got used to it the more it was said. There was one slight problem though with all of this, and that was the fact the girls' parents believed he was their daughter's boyfriend, and after speaking with each other agreed it was a fine idea to have him be their daughter's shared boyfriend. Now he didn't know why they came to such an agreement, but from the way his mother started getting along with them all, he couldn't just upright and deny it. And with his crush on the two girls, it was rather strange to be put in a situation where he could express his feelings without asking them out, which was a plus in his books. Shoto, Iida and Kirishima had already left since they were in good health and didn't have anything to say or do, and ended up saying their goodbyes and that they'd meet up when classes started again. That left Momo, Kyoka and Bakugo's parents along with Izuku's mother to mingle, and found they all got along swimmingly, much to the teens' annoyance when it came to telling embarrassing stories to each other about their children. "Oh God, where's the damn teacher to come and rescue us when we need it now?" yelled the super annoyed blonde Pomeranian. Kyoka agreed with this statement full-heartedly. "Yup, I'd even take Midnight Sensei intervening with another sex ed lesson than hear one more story about me doing something I have no freaking memory of." The others, who were all slumped in their seats, gave groans of agreement. Meanwhile, the adults hearing this all smiled and laughed at their children's antics until the principal and the teachers returned with a bandaged All Might besides them. "Ah, hello young Bakugo, Yaoyorozu, Jiro and Midoriya. It's good to see you all," said the blonde bandaged man. Izuku got up in a literal second, accidentally using his incredible speed to get up out quicker than the eye could see, and dashed towards his mentor. "Oh, thank Kami All Might Sensei, you're all right. I mean, I knew you were from how I saw you earlier, but what I mean to say is that I'm glad you're doing okay and not as bad as I used to look, all strung up in cast." Toshinori smiled and chuckled before he patted the boy he knew as his successor on the head. "I understand perfectly how you feel, young Midoriya. It's good to see that you're getting accustomed to your new additions to your appearance and abilities." Izuku blushed a little embarrassed but smiled back. "Thanks All Might Sensei. And yes, I've been doing well getting used to my abilities. I do make some mistakes every now and again though. That's to be expected when basically having multiple quirks all in one, and you've only had them for a couple days at best, but even then you were asleep for most of that time," pondered Toshinori. Before this conversation continued to go on, a cough came from the side, causing both to turn towards the cough. It was Aizawa, who was tired of all the small talk and wanted to get the important stuff dealt with. "If you two could stop reminiscing like a father and son, we got questions we want answers to." The two One for All users blinked before looking at the others, who were giving them looks of interest. That's when the two knew they were going to have to spill about it connection and the secret of One for All. Especially since the public would probably be getting it explained anyway. There wasn't really a problem with it. The only problem was how long it would take and all the extra context needed to be explained. "Okay, I guess I should start from the beginning," started Toshinori Yagi, also known as All Might, getting into the nitty-gritty of it. A few hours later, it had been quite some time since the secret that was One for All was revealed, and not only that, but Izuku's life before Ua and his struggles of living quirkless. Izuku still remembered how his mother cried and how Bakugo looked down guilty from it all. What was worse was when Momo and Kyoka hugged him as they cried. He had long ago became numb to those days of being quirkless, but seeing how the others reacted made him understand just how bad it was. Hell, even Nezu and Aizawa looked like they were planning on burning down his old school, and that's not with mentioning Uncle Masaru, and Momo's father John looked so cold that Izuku thought they were planning on assassinating the staff of Aldera. That was a while ago. Now Izuku was just finishing up going through extensive tests that Recovery Girl wanted him to go through, and the results were actually shocking to say the least. "Wait, so you're saying I'm absorbing sunlight and turning it into energy to strengthen my body even more? How is that even possible?" asked the blue-haired boy. Recovery Girl sighed and rubbed her eyes. "Maybe it has to do with one of the past user's quirks that evolved to absorb something else other than what it used to. To be honest, without knowing all the quirks of the past users, all we can do is just accept it and move on." Izuku nodded with this in mind. Not like he could do anything with this knowledge other than maybe planning on sunbathing now to get stronger, but that was just his mind trying to relax itself after learning such an absurd thing. The older heroine grabbed some papers that were printed from a machine and hummed. "Well, this is the last of the test results and it's quite strange in all honesty." Toshinori and Inko, who were in the room with the teen, perked up at this, and Inko couldn't help but ask, "What is it? Is it something bad?" The worry was evident in Inko's voice, but Recovery Girl shook her head. "It's not bad, it's just that the part of One for All that was used to pass on the quirk is gone, or as I'm looking at the results has changed." Toshinori tilted his head in confusion, and Izuku was unknowingly copying him. Recovery girl on seeing the two sighed. Kami, you two are too similar. To explain it in layman's terms, Izuku won't be able to pass the quirk on like it was in the past and will have to impregnate a woman to pass it down. The quirk is so ingrained into his DNA now that this would be the only way to produce another one for all user. What? Shouted out Izuku and Toshinori. Inko on the other hand took a moment to realize what was said, and when she understood it fully she gasped and then grinned joyfully. Yes. I'm gonna get grandbabies. Izuku turned to his mother with a giant blush. Mom. Don't say that and don't make it sound like I got a girl, you know what, without even having a girlfriend yet. Inko rolled her eyes at this. Oh shush, you have those two girls that are interested in you, so don't even say such things. You'll ask them out eventually, so it's just a matter of time. The teen just stared at his mother, not knowing what to do with what she said, and looked down at his lap. He thought about the implications of this and wasn't sure how to react. It was up to him getting together with a woman to pass on one for all, and with no real experience with girls it was basically impossible in his mind. It just had to evolve to be like this. Why, my luck is so weird sometimes. Thought the boy. Sighing once again, recovery girl texted Nezu the results and had in return got another text from the rat that made her grow a tick mark on her forehead. Damn that rat, the hell is he thinking? Turning to the three in the room, the old heroine spoke. Okay, with the test finished you all can go home. And Toshinori, your next appointment with me is tomorrow after the announcement Nezu is having, so don't forget. Toshinori gave an affirmative and got up along with Izuku and Inko before walking out of the hospital room. They walked for a bit until coming to the teachers and principal. They couldn't help but notice the smile on Nezu's face was bigger than usual, but just left that can of worms be. They all exited the hospital and drove off towards Ua, confusing Izuku and Inko. I'm sorry for asking, but wouldn't it be best for Izuku and I to go home until the announcement tomorrow? Asked Inko with a slightly confused expression. Nezu just smiled before responding. Usually I would agree with you, but with your son's relationship with Yagi-san revealed, we at UA don't believe it is safe at your home and instead are having you moved into the dorms of UA. Izuku and Inko became surprised at this and replied in unison, dorms. Nezu smiled more. Yes, an idea I had since the USJ incident actually, and the attack at the camp just sped it up to the point the dorms have all been made already and we were going to announce them soon, but now we will announce it along with Izuku and Toshinori's connection. Inko looked deep in thought for a few moments until she looked up towards the principal. Then what is going to happen to me once this all blows over? Will I need to quit my job to stay protected? The principal's smile faded after hearing this. I'm afraid you will have to quit your occupational and will be staying with us even after this blows over for your safety. And I actually want to give you an offer to be part of the staff at UA and help recovery girl as the school's second nurse. Inko went wide-eyed in surprise before stuttering. But I can't take such generosity. It doesn't seem right for me to have such special treatment. Aizawa groaned hearing this. He looked at the green-haired woman through the rear-view mirror. Ma'am, if it helps, this would be helping your son in the long run, just knowing that you're safe. And if that's not enough to convince you, then you could get to know the girls he's close to as our second nurse. I'm in, said Inko immediately after hearing the last part, causing Izuku to become embarrassed again. However, Izuku didn't have a real complaint and actually felt relieved that his mother would be safe and around heroes 24/7, and with her safe he could start thinking about more serious things. For instance, he had to deal with the press tomorrow, and that was going to be horrible since all the PR classes they had with Midnight so far had been a bust for him. He would always get nervous and worry about saying or doing the wrong things. But when thinking on this, he remembered his mother's words once again and thought, don't let self-doubt get you down, and remember that the part that makes you super isn't your quirk, but your heart. I can't back down like that anymore. I faced the #1 villain without fear, and yet a few reporters scare me. Yeah, that's going to have to change. I've faced much scarier things before in my life so far, and this shouldn't be too hard. With that thought molded in his mind, Izuku went throughout the day getting moved into the dorms and even dinner with a strong resolve in his eyes that everyone around him noticed. It was strange for them to see because it reminded them of different people. Some thought he looked like All Might, or in Toshinori's case reminded him of Nana. His utter resolve made them all rest easy. Strangely enough, it was like just being around him eased their worries and made them all feel as if everything was going to be all right, and even the announcement the following day would be nothing but a regular school meeting. If that wasn't enough, when he went out to train a little by lifting the weights All Might used to use during his time in UA, it made those who saw it remind themselves that the boy in front of them was stronger than even the #1 hero and would continue to grow from here. The next morning, the teen had gotten up early like usual and ate his breakfast before going for a run. Only problem was that his body didn't feel tired after a full hour of running at a ridiculous speed. After another hour and a half he gave up and went back to his new home where he took a shower. He didn't really need it since he didn't sweat at all but did it out of habit. It was around 11:35 a.m. when he was just relaxing on the couch with his mother that a familiar pink-haired girl barged into the dorm's double doors. "Hey Muscles, you here? It's me Hatsume, I got some shit to show you." Izuku raised an eyebrow before raising his hand towards one of the girls he secretly crushed on. "Hey Mei, what do you?" He was cut off by Mei jumping onto his lap and giggling maniacally. "There you are. Since I saw your fights and the one with that Darth Vader wannabe, I've been making you a new suit." Okay, replied Izuku, who was unsure what to do. Mei got off of him and dragged him off by his hand towards the support department, all the while not seeing Inko, who was staring at where the two just were. "He really is a chick magnet. Should I be worried about this?" asked Inko out loud, not getting an answer. Inside the support department, Izuku was forced to sit and wait on a stool as Mei searched through a pile of random tools and gadgets. He watched her, but his eyes kept drawing themselves towards the round rear that shook left to right as she searched. "So, what is it you wanted to show me?" asked the blue-haired boy, trying his best to keep his mind occupied. The pink-haired girl didn't respond for a second until she found what she wanted. "Aha. Here it is, now let me show you my newest baby." Izuku looked at the briefcase before looking up into her crosshair eyes. The pink-haired girl opened it up, showing the same symbol that was on the shirt he wore during his fight with All for One. "The same symbol from my fight?" he asked, still looking upon it. "Yup. I saw you and thought it looked good with all the blue and the red boots, and when I heard you were the direct student of All Might, I just couldn't help myself in making this," explained the girl as she puffed her chest out. The 9th user took the contents inside the briefcase and took it out, looking at it in all its glory. The costume was mainly blue with red boots, a red belt and a red cape with the symbol on the chest. In Izuku's opinion it looked great, and reminded himself of some of All Might's younger years and some of his more comic books type costumes that weren't really popular, but Izuku liked them more than some of the older ones his mentor wore. Turning to Mei, he could see her drooling with anticipation. Not wanting to let her down, he used his super speed to change and in an instant was wearing the hero costume. It showed off his muscles a bit more than he wanted, but it was super comfortable, and from the way Mei looked at him he could tell girls would like it a lot more than he was comfortable with. "Mei, you alright?" he asked with a slight blush. Mei Hatsume, the exuberant girl she was, did the unthinkable. She had launched herself at the boy and wrapped her arms and legs around his torso, and the only thing that kept him from falling over was his super strength. "You look awesome," exclaimed the girl loudly as she looked up from where her face was pressed against his chest. Izuku could just chuckle at her. "Yeah, you did a pretty good job, but why make me a new suit when I already have my green one?" Mei rolled her eyes hearing this. "Because that thing was too small from how much you've grown, and besides, if you're All Might's successor then you're gonna need to at least have a little homage to him, and that thing looks tacky compared to my baby." I mean, I guess that makes sense, and my old costume was more for practicality than looks. But with my newly gained invulnerability, all the padding and bracers wouldn't be needed, and taking all that away would just leave me in a green jumpsuit, making me look more like an electrician than a hero," explained the teen. Mei just nodded her head. "Yup, and with this suit you could easily wear it under your clothes like in the comics, no need to go home and change when you got it on you already. And I used an old clothing mixture from All Might's beginning suits during his time at UA, so you won't go naked in front of the cameras again from being on fire. I guess that makes sense and would be really useful," he said while rubbing his chin. It was right then that his phone rang and he picked it up with Mei still attached to his body, but he didn't seem to notice. "Hello." The voice of the principal came through the phone, speaking in his usual cheerful voice. "Midoriya, it's almost time for the announcement. You're required to come to the front, and when you get here we'll debrief you on what to saw and act." Izuku replied back. "Yes sir, I'll be there quickly, just give me a moment." He hung up after hearing his principal say goodbye and looked down to his chest to see Mei asleep. Apparently she did another all-nighter from how he just noticed the marks under her eyes. Smiling at the girl, he separated her from his body and placed her down on the couch specifically reserved for her since power loader kept finding her passed out at her desk. He took out a blanket from the side and covered her before he left. If only he knew that she had been awake and just pretended to be asleep so he would dot on her. It was something she started doing whenever she was sleepy and Izuku was around. She didn't understand why she did it though. I feel so strange when Muscles treats me like that. I should ask Midnight Sensei when I get the chance for advice. She thought to herself before going to sleep for real this time. Izuku made his way towards the front entrance of Ua until he froze in place, realizing his stupidity. How could I forget to get changed back? Oh well, I can just go and get my clothes really quick. Using his super speed, he ran back to the studio, grabbing his clothes and putting them on over his costume like Mei instructed. To his surprise, it was concealed very well and didn't feel uncomfortable to him at all. Mei never fails to impress. But I gotta go. Maybe I'll buy Mei lunch as a thank you, Izuku said before running off towards the entrance. In another blur he made it back to where he was before and walked the rest of the way until he was met with Nezu and a woman to his side. Hello Nezu sir, and to you too ma'am. Nezu smiled with the woman doing the same. Ah, nice to see you again Midoriya. As you can see, this is the president of the Public Safety Commission Makima and she would like a word with you. Hello, as you've been told I am Makima, no last name, so just Makima is fine. And I would like to say I am the President of Japan, would like to give you our thanks for your intervention the other day, and you will not be in trouble for doing the right thing. Izuku was rather bashful as he replied, it was nothing really, I just did what I thought was right and I couldn't very well stand still when knowing I could help. Smiling, Makima gave a nod. That's understandable, but what you did goes beyond doing the right thing. You risked your life for those of others and that can't be taken lightly. Therefore any laws you broke by fighting have been ignored, but you will be given a warning not to do hero work without your license, but from your previous encounters with villains I'd say that warning won't be paid that much attention to. Izuku grimaced. Yeah, my luck isn't exactly what we would call good. But I guess having a great school and amazing friends outweighs the bad. The two adults chuckled at this and proceeded to explain what they would be doing. Izuku didn't have much to do in this press conference other than sit for the whole thing until the end where the reporters could ask him questions. Izuku was a little worried about that last part, but like he promised himself, he'd stand tall and take anything that came his way no matter how embarrassed or scared he felt. So with his will strengthened he agreed and walked out with Nezu and Makima. They walked to the center of the podium table where Aizawa and Toshinori were standing, all the while the reporters murmured amongst themselves. Many flashes of lights went off from the cameras taking pictures of Izuku, making him feel like dying inside but keeping his strong face on to hide those emotions. Ignoring those lights for now, Izuku gave his mentor a smile and got one in return. They all sat down and Nezu started the meeting off with explaining most of what happened leading up to the fight between Toshinori and All for One. It took a little bit, but after that was done Nezu went on to explain how Izuku and Toshinori met over a year ago and helped train him. How Izuku cleaned up the Takoba Municipal Beach Park to train, and how on the last day when the entrance exam was held Toshinori passed on his quirk. At hearing the last part the reporters went into a frenzy, but with a glare from Aizawa they all stopped but kept their intense stares on Izuku and Toshinori. Nezu, seeing he could continue speaking, explained fully the backstory behind One for All and how it can no longer be passed on. A few in the crowd didn't believe it, but All Might went over the known predecessors and how he was now quirkless like the day he was born, and any test they did on him would show so, and that through testing they count contest to Izuku not having the passing part of the quirk anymore. It was a tough pill to swallow, but a reporter Izuku remembered from the day before stood and spoke. Then if it can't be passed on anymore, does that mean Izuku Midoriya will be the last of the line of users of this One for All? And if so, how strong do you believe he can become? Toshinori smiled proudly as he proclaimed, the power of One for All becomes stronger as it gets passed down, so each successor will become stronger than the previous holder. In other words, Izuku my boy will become stronger than I could ever be, and with how the quirk evolved after the camp attack he has awakened other powers which are all incredibly powerful. The reporter known as Chitos hummed at this while writing something down. She sat down, but in her mind she was grimacing. Shit, this will not go well for the Meta Liberation Army, unless... The woman stayed silent as a few more questions were asked and Nezu started to explain more on the dorms and how Izuku's vigilante acts were dismissed by saving their number one hero and defeating a strong villain that would have killed hundreds if not thousands if he wasn't taken down. With that said, some asked if it was appropriate to allow him to go against the law even if he ended up doing good in the end. Putting it in consideration was the debate of do the cost justify the means, and in this case do the laws being broken constitute being ignored just because All Might was saved and a string villain was defeated. In all, it came down to the Public Safety Commission president to step forward, now I believe is the one in charge of keeping the order and rules for our Japan's hero society, that I would have authority over such a decision. At this everyone focused on Makima, who spoke. I and the President of Japan have looked over his actions and found they all were under lawful authority under the Self-Defense Act. Each time he was put in situations where he didn't attack first unless to protect someone, therefore we have concluded that Izuku Midoriya is in the right and in this case did what was best for the public, so any charges are hereby dropped. A few were surprised at this, but more than enough accepted it and moved on, leading to the portion most were there for as Izuku was put on the spot to answer the public's questions. Immediately hands shot up and some started speaking to get the teen's attention, but the one Izuku chose was the woman he was most interested in since he saw her. You, Chitose-san, if I'm not wrong. Chitose smiled and stood up, getting a few grumbles of how it's always the pretty ones, but she didn't mind and asked her list of questions. You are correct, Midoriya-san. I'm Chitose from the Liberal Media of Japan news station and I'd like to say thank you for your intervention the other day. Izuku blushed at the praise but respectfully said, I just did what I thought I should as an aspiring hero. Doing the right thing isn't always easy, but making the tough choices are the most rewarding in the end. Very modest of you, but now I want to inquire on the type of person you are, if that's all right, said the reporter. Izuku felt a little uneasy at this but responded truthfully, I don't see anything wrong with that, ask away. Inwardly Chitose smirked as the hero in training was hooked. All right. I want to ask in your views on quirk usage and if you've ever heard of the Meta Liberation Army. The blue-haired boy thought about this for a few moments, using his more developed speed to think through his answer carefully while also being true to his own beliefs. I find that quirk usage could be changed a bit to allow more freedom, but at the same time there are some things we need to look at more carefully than we are currently, and as a matter of fact I have heard of them and even did a little digging into them when I was younger. Chitose was surprised to hear this along with the others, but Chitose smelt blood in the water and struck. And what exactly do you mean by some of that? If you can be more detailed, that would help me and the people at home understand. Izuku smiled before doing just that. Well, some things like quirks that aren't exactly dangerous but helpful could be like a person's car. Now stay with me in this, but I personally believe if someone can use their quirk that isn't dangerous and wants to do just that, then they should be able to, but also be held accountable for themselves. He got a few intrigued looks as he continued. For instance, they should have a quirk usage license so that those who aren't heroes are able to use their quirk in their line of work if it helps, and some policies could be put in place for accountability and accidents. This way, if someone just wants to use their quirk to fly around, they can if they have a license, but if they get into an accident or end up hurting someone, then the right course of action could be taken. Upon finishing what he believed to be asked of him, he started to explain the last part. I did research on the Meta Liberation Army when I was younger after hearing about them from a couple teachers. I researched the founder and his beliefs and how since his first proclamation for freedom for those with quirks and how that proclamation of freedom has been twisted so people who want to use their quirks with no repercussions and instill sense of superiority depending on how strong someone's quirk was. In all, I'm disappointed in how the Meta Liberation Army has evolved into what it is today. Chitose became angry. But a good amount of what Izuku had said wasn't exactly wrong, so she didn't attack him on it and kept her cool. All of your ideas are interesting, but what do you mean by what it is today? Do you believe the Meta Liberation Army is still active after all these years? Izuku sighed before looking at her with a stern gaze. Yes, it's very much still active. After all, in my search of answers to who they were, I joined an online group chain I found from an encrypted flyer online. I went down the rabbit hole and using a few skills I gained of programming and hacking, I was able to get into the server holding some key members of the organization, and I now remember where I've seen you before. Clothed reporter woman started to sweat. And where would that be from? Leaning forward with his hands crossed over each other, he spoke sternly. Why, my Lady Blue Rose, I didn't expect to actually meet you in person, but that begs the question, do you recognize me? There was a long silence before Chitoza's eyes went wide. Why you? Izuku smiled. Yup. Gotta say roleplaying as an adult male and even flirting with you for information was nice, but the pictures and videos you sent me were quite the reward in and of itself. Sputtering, Chitoza's face went purple from her skin color forming a blush. I sent all those pics and vids to a kid. Izuku just chuckled. Sorry about that, but then again I'm of legal age for Japan, so maybe we can have a date as an apology. Chitoza blushed harder before sitting down and covering her face with her notebook, trying to ignore the looks she was getting. Izuku, however, paled on the inside. Why did I say that? I said I was going to be bold from now on, not a playboy. A cough was heard and Izuku turned to his principal, who spoke. As entertaining as this is, I believe Midoriya has answered Miss Kazuki's questions and is now up for more. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Time skip. After about 15 minutes of questioning, Izuku was done and the meeting came to an end, although Izuku did have to answer to his teachers about his research into the Metal Liberation Army and his strange relationship with Chitoza. It took him explaining all of his research and notes while also telling them how he basically catfished Chitoza until they were satisfied, but even then, after all that, he had his mother to explain to. But once that was over, he finally got time to himself, where he sat down on the front stairs of the dorms and just enjoyed the peace and tranquility of it all. Deku, shouted a very familiar blonde. Why can't I ever just relax? Complained the blue-haired teen as he turned to see his classmates arriving with their stuff. Hey guys, good to see you, but aren't you a little early? I mean, we barely just announced the dorms, asked the blue-haired boy. Mina ran up with a bandage still around her neck. Forget that. What's this I hear about you charming my aunt? If I knew you were such a Casanova, I would have tried setting you up sooner. Izuku blinked. Sorry, but did you just say Chitoza-san was your aunt? Mina nodded her head while having her hands on her hips. Yup, she's my auntie and I've never seen her blush so hard. I made sure to get pics to blackmail her into buying stuff for me. Everyone just sweat dropped at this but turned back to Izuku. To their surprise, he was barely blushing, but what was more odd was how he looked at Mina. Now a couple of her stories about a rambunctious niece make more sense. Did you really have braces when you were younger? The pink-skinned girl paled fast before shakily looking at Izuku. Why you? How do you know that, and what else did she tell you? Izuku smiled innocently but with a dark aura around him. Oh, I know quite a bit. But I'll keep that secret for now as blackmail of my own, so let's drop this talk about me and Kazuki-chan. Mina simply nodded with dramatic tears in her eyes, now knowing not to mess with the used-to-be innocent boy in the class, or else he'd tell them all about her embarrassing moments and habits. Momo, finding this situation resolved, stepped up to Izuku and smiled. To answer your question before all that, Nezu sent emails to our homes and explained the dorms and how it would be safer to live on campus with heroes and you, of course. Izuku raised an eyebrow at this. Me? Kyoka rolled her eyes. Duh, you're the student of All Might and can kick the ass of the villain who defeated said #1 hero. Who else would someone feel safe with if not you? That makes a little too much sense. I just wish Nezu didn't make me into a arguing point for the dorm plan, said the boy with a deadpanned expression. Bakugo just scoffed. Quit getting butthurt and help us move in, you tall fuck. Izuku turned and gasped. Did the Katsuki Bakugo just ask me for help? Are you an alien or something that took Bakugo's place? The blonde boy's eyes burned in fury, but a hand taking his made him relax. Hiroshima smiled at his newly acquired boyfriend before turning to Izuku and said, Don't worry about it, Midobro. Since I started dating him the other day, he's chilled out a bit. Izuku just gave a soft hum. Didn't expect that, but I am happy for you too. And anyway, I'll show you inside into your rooms, since Aizawa gave me your guys' room placements, which now that I think about it was him pushing his work onto me. And so he did. He showed each of them their room and found that he was in between both Kyoka and Momo. He had a feeling that was Nezu's doing, but after finishing up he realized it was definitely Nezu's work since he was the only male student on the third floor. But then again that meant he could be around his crushes, so it was probably more of a blessing than anything, and probably just Nezu stirring trouble and drama to entertain himself. This was accented by him getting a text from the rat god stating that his thoughts were indeed right and to enjoy his youth. He wasn't sure about that last part but shrugged it off as he went down to the common room to see his mother talking with Sato about baking recipes. He smiled at the sight and went to the couch to sit down and relax as much as he could until school started back up. So he sat and watched TV until dinner time, where he helped his mother cook and ate with his friends. It was a pretty regular day besides the whole press conference that afternoon, and when he went to bed he had a small talk with the other users of One for All. Inside One for All, "Go fish," said Nana, making Banjo grumble. Banjo looked at his cards again while rubbing his chin. "What about Sixa?" Nana smirked. "Go fish." Banjo grew a tick mark and threw his cards. "Fuck this game. How can you not have any of the cards I have? That's literally impossible." The black-haired woman merely shrugged. "Ain't my fault you suck at this game, and besides it's about time the 9th gets here." At that moment Izuku fell from the sky and landed face first on the concrete platform. Nana smiled at this and pointed over her shoulder. "See? Got impeccable timing for stuff like this." Banjo just huffed and crossed his arms. "Fine, whatever, let's go talk to the kid." After standing up and walking away, Nana smirked, letting some cards out from under her gloves and thinking, "God, I love messing with that idiot. He still hasn't caught on to me cheating during our card games after more than a decade." She took her winnings of junk food and went over towards Izuku, who had started talking with Yoichi about the way the past user's quirks evolved into his new powers, so in other words nerd talk. After a bit of waiting for them to finish talking, which was a while, Nana cleared her throat to gain their attention, which worked as both hero nerds turned to her. Nana rolled her eyes at how similar both were and spoke. "So, it comes to my attention you're copying my cape 9th. Izuku blushed at this. "No, I'm not. I didn't even choose for May to put a cape on my costume." Nana giggled at him before stopping him from getting more embarrassed. "It's fine, kid, I know it wasn't your choice, I'm just pulling your leg. But anyway, how about we get to training? We didn't exactly get to teach you everything due to how little time we had." The 9th stopped blushing and became serious. "Yes, Nana-sensei, I'm ready." The other users smiled at this and proceeded to train Izuku to gain more control over his powers. After all, it would suck if he accidentally started breaking things due to not being able to control his strength or his more dangerous abilities. And that's how the rest of the night went, with Izuku gaining more control and finding new tricks to do with his quirks, like his heat vision being able to become a more focused beam or wide wave of destruction. But it didn't take long for him to say his goodbyes. He stirred awake in his bed and groaned. His eyes blinked tiredly and he sat up from his bed with a yawn. Rubbing his eyes and standing up from the bed, he went and did his morning routine, showered and dressed before he went down to the common room, where he saw Momo already awake and reading a book with a warm cup of tea at her side. Smiling fondly, Izuku greeted her. "Good morning, Momo. Are you the only one awake?" Momo looked up from her page and smiled. "Oh, good morning to you, to Izuku. And no, I saw Iida go for his morning run earlier." Izuku hummed at this and went to get some breakfast, which consisted of a few protein bars and a glass of chocolate milk from a hidden stash he had inside the fridge that no one knew about. He went and sat near Momo while eating. "So, how have you been since the attack? No nightmares or anything, because I know Sue said she was having trouble sleeping." Momo bristled a little before replying. "I'm having a bit of trouble too, actually, but more in the fact I dream back to how I saw you and how broken your body was as you were carried away in a stretcher at camp." Izuku solemnly nodded at this. "Sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up. I just wanted to make sure you were doing okay since you're usually not awake this early." Momo sighed and put her book down. "It's alright, Izuku. I just wish we didn't have to go through all of this, first with the USJ and now the camp. It's all just so much." The 9th understood where she was coming from and in an act of courage reached out and grasped her hand. It made her tense for a moment but soon relaxed and griped his hand back. They stayed like this for a bit, but Momo wanted to feel more of the comfort Izuku was giving her, so she scooted closer to him, having their legs rub and their shoulders touch. Izuku was surprised by this but went with it, as he too hadn't fully moved on from the camp attack and failing to save Bakugo the first time, so when her head rested on his shoulder he did the same and put his head on top of hers absently, noting her hair smelled sorta like books. Silence reverberated around the room as they stayed like this. just enjoying the comfort the other was giving and feeling safe. Their hearts that were once saddened and burdened by the attack were finally truly able to lighten and spark with a feeling of warmth and comfort, and an unexpected turn of events made the two lose themselves in that warmth. Lifting their heads and turning to look into each other's eyes, they slowly leaned forward until their lips connected. More sparks went off in their hearts and the lip contact made their bodies tense. Their lips mashed together as they embraced the warmth they were feeling and letting it guide them, and passion soon followed, but it was not to be as a voice rang out interrupting them. "What are you guys doing?" said the very familiar voice. The two broke their kiss to look and see Kyoka looking at them with a blush and wide eyes, which in turn made the two lovebirds realize what they were just doing and panic. It's not what it looks like, Kyoka," persisted Momo, but the fact Kyoka saw them kissing for a solid minute made her argument invalid. "You two were making out on the common room couch." "Hell Momo, your hand is still on his abs," shouted Kyoka, even more embarrassed about having to call her friend out on her obvious lie. Looking to where the punk girl was pointing, they both saw that indeed at some point Momo's hand had gone and started groping Izuku's abs. The heiress blushed deeper and snatched her hand away like she had touched a hot stove. Izuku wasn't much better as his entire face was red, and he tried to ignore the voices of Nana and Banjo in his head telling him he got cockblocked and how he was doing so well up until then. However, it was then that a new voice came from behind Kyoka. Guys, what's going on? It's too early for this much noise." Kyoka turned to see Mina and on reflex spoke, "Crap, hey Mina, good morning." Mina raised an eyebrow at this until she looked past the rocker girl and towards Izuku and Momo, who were still sitting very close and blushing like tomatoes. It took a second, but Mina's nose twitched and she sniffed the air before proclaiming with wide eyes and even larger smile, "I smell tea, and it ain't the one in that goes in teacups." Izuku and Momo sat with their faces firmly planted in their hands while Mina sat across from them in a chair she snatched from the dining room table. The pink-skinned girl relished the awkward and embarrassed faces of the two. But seeing she had tea to acquire, she broke the silence. "Who wants to start first? Oh, how out you Midori want to tell me how you conquered this maiden's heart." Izuku sighed, knowing the best option he had at this point was to tell the truth. "It's not like that, Mina, we were just caught in the moment is all." Mina deadpanned at him. "So you call having your tongue down her throat just being in the heat of the moment? Now I'm interested in how you are when you're actually doing it on purpose. Wonder if you would have grabbed her ass or breast." "Mina!" yelled Momo with a flushed face. Mina just turned to her friend without any shame. "What? You're just as bad, Missy. You had your hands all up his shirt from what I pried from Kyoka." Speaking of which, Kyoka was next to Momo with a blush still present on her face due to walking in on Izuku and Momo, but more so was how Mina blatantly exposed her crush on the boy sitting on the same couch as her. Izuku himself gave her a few looks of interest which just made the poor girl groan into her legs that were sat up and had her arms around them with her face buried in her knees. Izuku thought it was a little cute but shook his head of those thoughts. "Mina, knock it off, we're both just confused on our feelings is all. Sure, maybe something can come from this, but until that happens, can you just give us some space to ourselves to figure out our feelings?" Izuku said, trying his best not to blush and show weakness. The pink-skinned girl looked at him for a solid minute before sighing and conceded, "Fine, but I want to know as soon as you three start dating so I can get the scoop on things." The trio blushed and exclaimed, "Mina!" Their outburst caused the alien girl to giggle madly and stand up from her chair. "Oh come on, I can tell there's some sort of love triangle between you three. It's only a matter of time before you guys figure it out yourselves." The three on the couch didn't say anything and watched the alien girl put the chair back while teasing them. They waited a bit longer until Mina was finished and started eating her breakfast a bit away from them. Kyoka sighed, pressing her face further into her knees. "This is the worst." Momo, seeing her beat friend upset, tried her best to comfort her. "It's okay, Kyo-chan. I mean, sure, your crush was told you liked him, but I can safely say getting caught making out is much, much worse." The dread in Momo's voice made both Izuku and Kyoka wince, but also ended up making Kyoka feel a little bit better, but not by much. "Thanks, I just sorta thought he would never find out. I definitely never planned on telling him, and having my feelings thrust into the open like that makes me feel exposed." Momo nodded sadly to this. "As someone whose hero costume makes me show a lot of skin, I can sympathize with you on some strange level, though I am curious." Kyoka lifted her head from her knees and turned to her friend. "Yeah. The heiress cleared her throat and continued with her train of thought. Well, I'm curious on how you ended up forming a crush on Izuku. Personality for me, it was how he acted towards me and always tried to be cheerful yet hopeful. It also didn't hurt that he didn't perv on me like most of the boys in class. Izuku smiled at this and listened to Kyoka's sigh. Alright, yeah, those are pretty good points. But for me, it has to be his caring nature that makes it so that he doesn't think how ugly I am or how my body isn't developed. No offense Yaomomo, but I'm pretty jealous at how much of a better woman you and the rest of the girls are compared to me. Momo's happy expression faded into a sad one and she reached over to grasp Kyoka's hand. Kyo dear, you are not ugly and your body is your own, which means it's perfect just the way it is. Heck, I've seen Izuku check out your legs quite a few times since you've propped them up like you have them, so if that says anything, he's definitely not uninterested in your looks like you think. The blush forming on Izuku's face was enough evidence that Momo's words were true, yet Kyoka couldn't help but doubt. Izuku caught the shift in body language telling him that Kyoka was still in denial. Momo is right, I may not be a pervert like Mineta or Kaminari. But even I can see you and Momo are both highly attractive people. Sometimes I wonder if I'm in a modeling school instead of a hero school from how amazing you and all of the rest of the girls look. The two girls blushed deeply at this and gave him thanks in their own way. Momo gave him a kiss on his cheek and Kyoka smiled brightly and verbally thanked him since she was too shy to do what Momo did. The three stayed like this for a bit, talking about their feelings, and progressed to other topics as time passed by. Soon enough everyone had gone downstairs for breakfast and their day officially started. Not a lot happened since they were all on break, so a few days came and went in a flash. That was until Toshinori Yagi, also known as All Might, texted Izuku around 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Intrigued, Izuku opened the text and read it. Less than young Midoriya, it's been a bit since we've last talked. I'm still super proud of you and am currently reaching out to invite you and anyone who wants to join you to go on a trip to Island. Now usually I would have gone myself and invited you along, but due to Recovery Girl's orders I am to stay on UA campus until she gives me the go-ahead. That being said, I hope this helps you relax and is a fun trip for you. Also, if you can please say hi to my old friend David Shield and his daughter Melissa while you're there, that would be lovely. Greater than. After thinking of how to reply, Izuku replied, less than thanks All Might Sensei, I appreciate it and look forward to going. Is it alright if I bring 2 or more people with me? And I'll make sure to say hello for you. Greater than. After waiting a bit he got a reply saying he could bring up to 3 people with him since the plane wasn't going to be too large. Izuku replied it was fine and now was thinking of who to bring with him. Obviously he would bring Momo and Kyoka since he and them had been bonding the last couple days and have gotten pretty close with each other, but the real question was who to bring as a third. It didn't take long for the universe to answer his question for him as a mop of pink hair burst through his door and yelled, Muscles. You have room for little old me, right? Izuku looked at Mei Hatsume in utter confusion before saying his thoughts aloud. Mei, how did you know I was going to Island? Mei rolled her eyes and waved her hand dismissively. Oh, that's simple, I have your phone bugged and a tracker implanted into it. But forget that, you got room for me to go or not? On principle he almost told her no, but how could he say no to those puppy eyes she was giving him? Fine, you can come, but I still have to ask Momo and Kyoka if they want to join me, so get your stuff packed for when we have to go. Mei smiled brightly before hugging the tall blue-haired boy and running off shouted over her shoulder, thanks Muscles, see ya when it's time to leave. Izuku just stood there a second before replying back in small voice, you're welcome. I'm starting to think I will regret that choice in the future. Shaking his head at his weak will to say no to beautiful woman, he walked out of his room and towards Momo's room. It was a little later that he knocked and was allowed in with a soft, come in. Once inside the room he saw Momo and Kyoka on the rich girl's oversized bed lounging about scrolling through Netflix. On seeing him Momo sat up and waved. Hey Izuku, is there something you need or do you wanna hang out with us? Izuku smiled at the two and answered, yeah, All Might gave me the opportunity to go to Island in his place and I was wondering if you two would like to join me. Momo smiled widely and hopped out of bed and tackled Izuku in a hug, I'd love to. The blue-haired boy chuckled at the heiress and turned to Kyoka, and you rockstar. Kyoka blushed at the nickname but nodded, sure, it would be cool getting out of the dorms since it's starting to become dull since we're not allowed to leave campus. Izuku and Momo nodded to this. For all that the dorms were set up to be, they soon realized after moving in that it was quite boring once you get in the routine of doing the same stuff over and over. So with getting his answers, he took out his phone and texted all Mote that he was being Momo, Kyoka and Mei along with him. Momo, who was still in his arms, looked at the phone and raised an eyebrow. Hatsume is coming with us. Izuku turned to her after sending the text. Yup, apparently she bugged my phone and put a tracker in it. I'm still not sure how to feel about it, but a part of me is grateful she could find me if I ever get into trouble. Momo immediately added to this, but on the other hand, she can see your text, phone calls and probably your photos and search history, right? Yeah. On second thought, this is probably a bad thing, but knowing her, I probably can't stop her, so I just gotta let her do her thing. Replied Izuku with an emotionally exhausted expression. Before anyone could say anything else, Izuku's phone dinged, notifying him that he had a message. He opened his phone to see that All Might replied with a few thumbs up and said the flight would be at 9:35 a.m. the next day. Izuku replied his thanks and put his phone away. It was then that Kyoka spoke up. You know, you've been holding Yaomomo in your arms for like a full minute now, right? The blue-haired boy nodded. Yeah, but she's comfy, like a body pillow, but warm and smells nice, kinda like coconut and pineapple. Momo blushed red at the words. Thanks for the compliment. Chuckling, Izuku nodded. I would say it's a nice thing about you, princess. Now how about we cuddle in the bed for a bit and have Kyoka join in? The heiress nodded with a blush as she shoved her face into his chest and allowed him to pick her up and float them over and onto the bed next to Kyoka, who took the opportunity to snuggle into Izuku's side. They stayed like this for most of the day and only stopped when they had to go to sleep. Izuku, being the gentleman he was, went back to his room to sleep since he didn't wanna push their relationship too far just yet. Although personally the girls wouldn't have minded if he stayed and slept in the bed with them. Yet then again, if Izuku's mom, who just so happened to be the dorm manager, found them together, then that would have been bad, so they understood where he was coming from. The next day, Izuku woke up around 7:38 a.m. and went through his morning routine. He had gotten showered and dressed before heading downstairs to see that his mother had made him and his friends some breakfast. Izuku, good morning. I hope you're ready and packed for your trip in a few hours. You made sure to pack your deodorant, toothbrush, shower supplies and extra clothes, right? Izuku nodded while trying to ignore the way his friends were holding in their laughs and giggles. Yes, Mom, but I am a little light on clothes that fit me, so I may buy some while we're at Island. Inko smiled happily and guided him over to sit in between Kyoka and Momo. That's good to her. No, eat up or you'll be late. The three who were going replied with a hi before digging into their food. Today the breakfast was miso soup, rice, some fish and green tea. The others at the table dug into the food with the occasional compliment thrown at Inko's cooking. However, the table went silent when All Might, also known as Toshinori Yagi, came into the dorm and was greeted by Inko rather informally. Hello Inko, you still have a plate left for me. Inko giggled with a slight blush. Of course Toshinori, come sit with me and we can talk about some of Izuku's embarrassing moments when he was younger. A loud cough and choking sound came from Izuku, who grabbed his tea to help him not choke to death. He got the food down and turned to see Inko and Toshinori sitting together already and talking about the time Izuku brought his All Might figurines to school when he was 9. Shoto Todoric, Izuku's close friend, looked at the interaction between Inko and Toshinori before turning towards Izuku. So, if he wasn't your dad before when I asked, does this mean he's becoming your stepdad? Izuku didn't bother to reply while looking at his master, his sensei, his mentor and father figure, basically flirting with his mother. Nana, am I seeing this right? From inside his head he could hear laughing as Nana and Banjo laughed their asses off. It was only Yoichi that replied to his inquiry. Sorry 9th, but it appears the 8th is rather fond of your mother. Izuku paled further before fainting and slamming his face onto the table, this indirectly gaining the attention of Inko, who sat up and shouted worriedly, Izuku. A little bit later, our protagonist walked to the plane on the tarmac with dead eyes and left eye twitching from hearing Kyoka giggling every few minutes. She had been poking fun at him the last hour or two for fainting at finding out All Might was interested in his mother. Rockstar, it's not that funny, said Izuku in his dead inside voice. Kyoka just continued to giggle before responding, oh of course it's not funny, it's hilarious. She proceeded to laugh so hard she started snorting cutely. Momo, who was next to her, rolled her eyes but didn't stop the smirk that had been plastered on her face from going away. Mei, who was next to the group with a giant duffel bag, hummed to herself, not caring for whatever the others were talking about. They made it to the plane not longer after and boarded it. Huh, no pilot. I wonder if it has an AI, said Mei, and she made grabby hands at the cockpit. But before she could even touch the glass door to the cockpit, Izuku grabbed her and sat her down in a seat. She looked up at him to see his arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. I sure hope you weren't about to dismantle our navigation system right before we lift off, because if you were, then I'd have to handcuff you to your chair for the rest of the flight. Mei gasped dramatically. I would never. Okay, maybe I would, but come on, butt dimples, I won't get another chance at seeing an AI since I've been banned by most stores and companies in Japan that sell them. Izuku's sweat dropped at this. And maybe there's a reason for you being banned. Mei shrugged. I mean, is making a proton reactor in my garage from stolen tech really that bad, or trying to make a super collider during a tech demonstration? At hearing the pink girl's words, the trio responded in unison, yes. The maniac inventor pouted at this and grumbled how unfair it all was. Meanwhile, Izuku and the girls shook their heads at the girl and went about putting their luggage away and sat themselves down for the long flight. 3.5 hours later. After a long flight of Izuku stopping Mei from sneaking off to assess the AI piloting system, the plane landed and drove up to the departure stairs. Gathering their luggage was rather easy, but departing definitely was not. Since Izuku, Momo and Kyoka were heroes in training, apparently they were supposed to wear their hero costumes. Izuku of course had his costume underneath his clothing, so it was easy for him to dress himself by just taking his clothes off. The girls, however, had a bit of difficulty since the bathroom changing rooms were small, causing both girls to struggle in changing into their costumes. Thankfully for Momo, her costume was upgraded by Mei to be made of her DNA. Momo made sure to mention it to her parents that the support company they requested her old costume from didn't even tell her about the DNA synthesizer cloth was an option. Sure enough, a week later the support company was in ruins and it was sold to the Yaoyorozu company as compensation during the legal dispute. Momo still smiled when thinking about it. Kyoka's costume had a few tweaks here and there but kept the punk aesthetic. The only new addition was a fishnet underneath her shorts that she switched out for her old baggy pants. The jacket was also changed to be shorter and be more punk in her opinion. In exiting the changing bathroom, the two girls went over to Izuku with their luggage in hand. Izuku, upon seeing them, smiled and complimented them. Wow, and I thought you two were pretty beforehand. Now I don't know what to call you two. Mei laughed boisterously and answered for the girls. I'd say sexy, cool, sleek, amazing, or incredibly eye-catching. Izuku looked at Mei for a few solid seconds before asking, are you talking about the girls or the costumes and gadgets you made them? Not even a second after he asked this, Mei replied, their costumes and support gear, of course. The overpowered teen and the two beauties had varied reactions to this. Izuku sighed and shook his head. Momo leveled an irritated stare at Mei and Kyoka raised an eyebrow at the girl's antics. Letting that go for now, the group exited the plane and stepped down the stairs and onto the concrete. Izuku smiled widely at seeing all of the heroes and buildings and even noticed the giant hero known as Godzilla. But like always, whenever things were looking up for the teens, it just had to get ruined. In this case it started when the voice of a photographer rang out for all to hear. Oh my god, it's All Might's successor and hero of Kamino Ward. Midoriya, over here, over here. Izuku pled, seeing the swarm of people coming at him with cameras and microphones. Oh, super crap. Mei, Momo and Kyoka took their chance and escaped the mop of people, just barely escaping to see Izuku swarmed by reporters asking questions and a few female fans asking for his signature and a photo with them. Izuku could hear the voice of Nana laughing at his expense but ended up giving her own wisdom on guiding him through the experience of his first mop of fans and reporters. The teen was grateful to his predecessor and mentally thanked her a few minutes later after he finished with the last autograph. Strangely enough, they were all calling him by a different hero name than the one he chose with Midnight in class. He watched the last group of people leave and mumbled to himself, Superman. I don't really think it suits me, but if it's what I'm called, I guess I don't really have a choice now, die? Momo with the other girls walked up to him and answered, not really. Apparently the S I put on your shirt during your fight with that villain has caused people to think it's related to your hero name since it hasn't been released publicly. Kyoka hummed at this. Yeah, but then again, Superman is kinda catchy, and just between us, I didn't really like Deku as a hero name. No offense, Green, but it was kinda lame. Izuku sighed at hearing this. It wasn't that bad. and it was like a representation of my strive to not be weak and show the world I wasn't as useless for being born quirkless. Kyoka shrugged before she and the others started walking. Whatever you say, big guy, but Superman sounds better. The ninth user just mentally sighed in aspiration before following the girls. Unbeknownst to him, a few men had arrived the same time as him but at a secured and unsupervised docking bay. Izuku and his companions walked through Eye Island exploring its extensive supply of hero support gear and inventions. Mei was ecstatic, going from gadget to gadget like a child in a candy shop. The blue-haired teen chuckled when Mei found a pair of jet boots that she liked, but his brief moment of amusement turned to horror as he saw Mei started bickering with the inventor of the boots about how he should have made it differently. Shortly after, Mei was kicked out of the inventor section of Eye Island and had to spend a few hours with Kyoka in the hotel they were given to cool off. This left Izuku and Momo to wander around until they decided to sit and have lunch. They had ordered their food at a little place that sold American-style food and sat outside under a table with an umbrella. Izuku could tell quite a few people were looking at him and gossiping, but he tried his best to ignore them to focus on spending time with Momo. "So have you had fun on our chaotic trip so far?" he asked the heiress. Momo smiled sweetly before leaning forward and resting her chin on her palm. "Yes. Even with Mei's unfortunate outburst earlier, I have had fun." Izuku smiled back at her. "That's good to hear. Have you gotten used to your new costume yet?" The heiress hummed and nodded. "Yes, it's better than that leotard I wore, and the fact it's more armored than that cloth used in my old costume is definitely a plus. Speaking of costumes, when did you get this new one? I haven't seen you in it until now." The ninth user of One for All shrugged and took a sip from his root beer. "Mei made it a while back, a little after my fight with All for One. Apparently she really dug the design of the mostly blue and red with the addition of the symbol you put on my shirt." Momo blushed at the slight praise. Well, I'm glad she liked it enough to keep it as part of your costume. I'm rather flattered, actually." Izuku gave a cheeky smile to this. "Oh, I'm glad you feel that way, Momo." He paused for a second before forming a small blush of his own. "So, have you and Kyoka come to an idea on what our relationship is?" Momo took a moment to fight back the blush on her face and nod meekly. "We've decided to date you, only if that's alright, of course, since we know you're busy and have a lot on your shoulders, Aura." She was cut off as Izuku interlocked his hand with hers and speaking in a soft, comforting tone. "I understand. I want to be with you too as well, and I can create time to be with you both. It's no trouble at all." They looked into each other's eyes and started to lean forward until a voice came from their side, causing them both to freeze and turn to see none other than Kyoka and Mei. The former wasn't paying attention as she fiddled with a device, but the latter was definitely paying attention. She blushed a dark red and pointed to the people around them. "You do know you're in public, right?" Both teens blushed at her words as they saw people taking pictures and videos of the pair. Crap, was their only thought as they both realized that people were probably posting their intimate moment to social media. Izuku cleared his throat and rubbed the back of his neck. "Sorry, I got caught in the moment again." Momo shook her head. "No, I am also to blame. I should have known better from my time spent being taught about keeping a public appearance by my family tutors growing up." At hearing this, Izuku remembered his now girlfriend was rich. "Huh, I kinda keep forgetting you're rich for some reason until you say something like that." Kyoka doubled down on this to tease her best friend. "Yeah, until she says something outrageous like you tend to forget about it. Sorta like that time she told us about how she owned an island under her name over in the Roman Sea called the Mischira." Momo blushed and fidgeted. Please stop teasing me, Kyo, it's embarrassing." Luckily for the Ravenet, the waiter arrived with their food and got the orders of Mei and Kyoka. This allowed Izuku and Momo to eat while Mei animatedly talked about her ideas for possible upgrades to their costumes and gadgets. A little later and they all had eaten, but Izuku heard a particular conversation happening a few tables away from two reporters. The female reporter leaned into her fellow reporter and said, "So the next big scoop will be Momo Yaoyorozu and her boyfriend, the up-and-coming hero in drawing, Superman. I can't wait for it to be printed. With these last few photos the story can be published by late this evening." The only thing Izuku could think was, "Fuck. That's not good, is it?" The voice of Nana answered this in a muggish tone. "Nope. But then again, just wait until they find out you're pinning after more than one girl. Now that will be fun to see." Izuku facepalmed and half-heartedly thought of using his heat vision on the camera the male reporter was carrying. However, he knew that would just make it worse, so he let it be. The group departed the restaurant after Kyoka and Mei ate and walked around to the clothing section of the island, and while they walked they bumped into a special someone. Izuku walked in the front of the group while he talked to Kyoka about her favorite bands like Red Hot Chili Peppers and more. That conversation however was cut short as he walked right to someone scattering their belongings onto the ground. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there." Izuku immediately apologized as he leaned forward to lend the person a hand. The person was a blonde young woman probably a year or two older than Izuku and his friends, with glasses. "No, I should have been more careful while carrying my supplies." She took his hand and stood up and finally got a look at who she bumped into, and in seconds her cheeks burst into a blush and she stammered, "Why are you Uncle Might's successor?" Izuku blinked in confusion before his mind clicked the pieces together. "Oh, you must be Melissa Shield. All Might Sensei told me to say hi to you and your dad for him while I was here. Seems I didn't need to try looking for you like I originally thought." Melissa blushed more at this and twiddled her thumbs together in a way that Izuku found cute. "Why yeah, it seems so." He watched as Melissa tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and couldn't help but notice how pretty she was, well until he felt a push to his side and when he turned he was met by Momo and Kyoka pouting at him. It was super cute, but he didn't let that distract him as he comforted his newly made girlfriends. "This is pretty much All Might's niece Melissa Shield and daughter of All Might's old partner David Shield. Toshinori Sensei told me to tell them hi for him while we were here." Kyoka looked the girl up and down before comparing the girl's physical properties to Momo. She found Momo was taller and had a bigger bust while Melissa had wider hips. Giving a hum to her observations she noted the blush on the blonde's face and mentally sighed, "Great, another one. What is this, the fifth or sixth girl so far? Let's see, there's me, Momo, Uraraka, Toru, Sue. I'm pretty sure Mei and now this one. Does he have a secret attraction quirk or something?" She got knocked out of her thoughts by Momo nudging her. Looking around she saw the others were looking at her making the purplet shrug and asked, "What, do I have something on my face?" Momo with red cheeks cleared her throat and answered, "No, but you did just put the girls that have a crush on Izuku, including yourself." Kyoka froze in silence for a solid couple of seconds before breaking it. "Oh. Well, it's not like what I said wasn't true, so I don't see any reason to defend my reasoning and we're both dating him so it's fine." This was when Izuku cleared his throat to get the group's attention and hopefully change subjects. "So maybe we should move this elsewhere, people are beginning to stare." The others looked around to see other people pointing or whispering to each other as they gestured towards them. This caused them all to scurry off into a store they had wanted to enter and huffed in relief to see no one taking any real notice of them. Melissa let the tension in her shoulders give way and relaxed. She turned towards Izuku and the girls before greeting them again. "As Midoriya said, my name is Melissa Shield and it's a pleasure to meet you all." Momo, Kyoka and Mei greeted the girl back while Izuku gave a happy nod at the non-aggressive greeting the girls gave the blonde and started to speak up. "Sorry to drag you into such a bizarre situation with those people looking at us like that. I can see you were going somewhere with those supplies, so why don't I join you while the girls do their shopping?" Melissa blushed and turned to Momo and Kyoka who looked at her inquisitively. I don't mind, but what about your girlfriends? Won't it be bad to leave them to go off with another girl you just met?" Izuku hummed at this before turning to the girls. "I'll let you choose what I wear to the party tonight if you let me go with Melissa. I actually really wanted to speak with her father and greet him in person, but I don't have to if you girls don't want me to." Momo and Kyoka beamed at deciding his clothes for tonight, but Mei for some reason was a little harder to convince, causing Izuku to think of something on the spot. Mei, I can also get my hands on an eye for you to tinker with when we get back to Ua if that works for you." The pink-haired girl grinned in victory. "You got yourself a deal, but make no mistake." She got extremely serious and radiated a powerful aura. "If I don't get my AI, you'll be wearing nothing but a Speedo for the rest of your time at UA." Izuku paled to a new shade of white before stuttering out a response, "Oh, of course." His affirmation caused Mei to relax and pat his shoulder. "Good, now get along before I ask for more." In a literal blur, Izuku ran out, taking Melissa along with him, leaving the three girls to their devices. Kyoka looked between the two and asked, "So, what are we going to make him wear?" Momo perked up at the question and ran to the more expensive part of the store, dragging the two along with her. "I have just the right idea for what would suit him." Mei glanced at Kyoka. Does she know she just made a pun? Kyoka shook her head in the negative. "Nope, but she's too focused to care, so just leave it be." with Izuku and Melissa. The pair had gone to Melissa's lab to deposit her belongings before heading to see her father. In that time, Melissa showed him what she called the full gauntlet and explained its inner workings. From Izuku's time hanging around Mei, he understood a fair bit of what she explained, but when she went into detail on the purpose of gauntlet, he was surprised. "You mean, this was made for All Might Sensei?" He looked down at the gauntlet fully deployed on his hand and forearm before turning back to Melissa. "Pretty much, but now I guess it's a little redundant since he's retired and you've gained full control over your strength." Izuku grimaced at this and made the gauntlet retract into the band it was originally in. "Sorry. Why are you apologizing? Isn't not breaking your bones a good thing?" Melissa asked incredulously. "Well, you're not wrong. I just feels bad that it can't be used for its old purpose anymore. Instead, the only real purpose I can see for it would be to upgrade my suit to something more durable than Sensei Might's costume or my own," the blue-haired boy explained. At hearing this, Melissa nodded in understanding. "That does make sense, but I still don't think it's more durable than my father's suits for Uncle Might. However, I do see your point." As they talked further, they came to their destination, which was David's lab, also causing Izuku to internally fanboy at the idea of meeting the man who made his mentor's support equipment over the years. Melissa took out a keycard and swiped it through the door scanner and made it blink green, allowing her to open the door for Izuku and herself. Taking a few steps inside, she saw her father speaking to his colleague. "Papa, look who I came across today," she called out. David turned to his daughter with a smile before going wide-eyed at seeing Izuku. Turning back to his colleague, he apologized for their talk being cut short but agreed to speak with him later. Izuku heard that the colleague's name was Samuel and hummed in thought as the man walked past him, but he refocused on David, who now stood in front of him and introduced himself. "Nice to meet you, Midoriya. I see you've already met my daughter Melissa." Izuku greeted back with a handshake. "It's nice to meet you too, Shield-san. And yes, we met a little bit ago and told her Toshinori-sensei said hi. Speaking of which, Toshinori wanted me to say hi to you as well while I was here in his place." David smiled at this and returned the handshake and afterwards waved his arm dismissively. "That's fine, it's good to hear from him and to see my little girl making friends." The 9th user nodded at this. "Well, she's a remarkable young lady from what I've learned through speaking with her, so it's hard not to like her." The blonde girl currently being spoke of blushed at the praise. "I'm nothing special really, and besides you're the successor of Uncle Might, so if anything you're the special one." Izuku shook his head at this. "I may be All Might's successor, but I am still a normal guy trying to get through high school. Sure, I'm incredibly strong, but I can say the same about your amazing intelligence, Melissa. You're one of a kind just like Mei and your father, so don't doubt yourself like that." At this, Melissa twirled a piece of her long blonde hair with an embarrassed and appreciative blush on her cheeks. "Thank you, Izuku." The blue-haired young man simply smiled back and rested his fist on his hips unconsciously. "You're welcome, Melissa. Now I'm pretty sure you wanted to speak to your father about improving on your full gauntlet to somehow incorporate it into a suit for me?" This got Melissa out of her embarrassed state and turned to her father, who had a very amused grin plastered on his face. She cleared her throat before explaining about her and Izuku's talk about the full gauntlet and how Izuku was thinking it would be perfect for a suit upgrade. David, after hearing the proposal, turned to Izuku and asked about his personal equipment technician. In return, Izuku gave him Mei's card and explained her eccentric personality and how she was the one to make the suit he was wearing currently. To Izuku's surprise, David recollected about his old habits of exploding his old gadgets, and to further surprise Izuku, Melissa agreed that she had done the same for a good amount of her time as a hero equipment maker up until a year ago. Apparently it was a phase that you either come out of or stay in. For Izuku, he just hoped it was a phase for Mei, as he feared what she'd be like when she was older if she stayed the way she was. They spoke for about an hour until Izuku had to go to the hotel he and the girls were staying at. He said his goodbyes and said he'd meet them at the party later that evening. When he got to the hotel, he took a shower and got dressed in the clothes he was given by Momo. However, what he got was very expensive looking, which caused him to turn to the Ravenet and ask, "Momo, how much did this cost exactly?" The heiress didn't even stop to look at him as she put on her makeup to answer, "About $4,000 in American. Why?" Izuku could feel his inner Uraraka faint at that ridiculous amount of money and replied back in shock, But I can't pay that back." Momo stopped completely and turned to him with a raised eyebrow. "Who said anything about you paying me back?" The successor of All Might stared at Momo like he was looking at a puzzle he didn't quite understand. which caused Momo to sigh and turn to him fully. Izuku, I'm going to be frank with you. I am in love with you. You are my and Kyoka's boyfriend and I want to see you in a nice suit, so I bought you a nice suit to dress in for tonight, nothing more, nothing less. Izuku tried to retort. This bit was sternly cut off. I can buy you whatever I want, you're not forcing me into it, so don't even go there. I choose to do it, so you should have no problem with it. And if that isn't enough for you, think of it this way. My family has so much money we literally don't know what else to do with it aside from what we already do, like charities and funding research, so sometimes we just want to spend it on something, and right now is one of those times. The others in the room looked at her for a solid second before Kyoka broke the silence. Yeah, remember how I said you're sometimes clueless to flaunting your wealth? Well, you just did it again. At hearing her best friend's words, Momo blushed again and turned back to the mirror to continue applying her makeup. Well, I can't deny who I am now, can I? Besides, it's not like I'm flaunting it on purpose, so it's not actually a problem. At this, Izuku sighed in resignation. Fine, but in the future I'm going to pay you back, even if it's in the simple form of just a small favor. Momo smiled a little slyly before turning back to her normal smile. Sure thing, now suit up or we'll be late. Mei groaned at the pun and Kyoka snorted. Izuku, however, just rolled his eyes and in a blur of motion changed into the suit. However, his tie wasn't done and hung around his collar as he tried listening to the advice of the past users. Nana was trying to get him to go under while Banjo told him to go over with the piece he was holding, causing him to get confused. And it was then that he realized they were messing with him. Oh, real mature guys, can you just help me and not make me look like a fool in front of the girls? Nana projected her, mentally shrugging into his mind. I don't know what you're talking about. And if you really want help, why don't you ask one of your 3 girlfriends to help you, or even call up that blonde for help? Banjo cut in at hearing this. First off, I was giving the right instructions, and secondly, they aren't all his girlfriends. Izuku smiled at this. Thank you, Banjo, at least one of you is a decent. He was interrupted as Banjo laughed boisterously. After all, they're all going to be his future wives. Izuku facepalmed. Oh, for the love of. He sighed in defeat before turning to the other occupants of the room, who were each giving him looks. Mei was looking at him confused, Kyoka was looking at him with a sly expression, and finally Momo was looking at him lovingly. Deciding to use some of the advice of his predecessors, he went over to Momo and asked for help with his tie. Momo nodded joyfully to the request and stooped up to grab his tie and show him how to do it properly. And that should do it, but there's something missing. She took a step back and looked him over before a figurative lightbulb came to her mind. In a flash of her quirk, she produced a pair of glasses and handed them to him. Izuku was curious at first, but the reassuring look Momo gave him caused him to comply and put them on. Okay, so how do I look? He asked, feeling a little self-conscious. Kyoka nodded while looking him up and down. Nice, but I'd prefer something punk like a leather jacket and jeans, but it'll do. Mei had gotten up from her seat on one of the 2 beds and walked around him, squeezing his muscles every now and then before stopping and grinning ear to ear. Nice, and I see you put your suit underneath this clown costume, very good choice. Momo rolled her eyes as Kyoka laughed at the quote-unquote clown costume. After the commotion calmed down, Momo gave her own words on Izuku's appearance. You look very dashing, Izuku, a real knight in shining armor. The teen smiled genuinely at the compliment and pecked her on the cheek. Thanks, you girls look rather beautiful as well. They smiled at him, with Momo and Kyoka giving him a kiss on the cheek, leaving lipstick marks. Mei, however, at seeing the affection, copied them, much to Izuku's surprise. Mei didn't seem to think much of it and gave a genuine smile at the tall blue-haired teen. What? Just because I'm a maniac for support items and technology doesn't mean I'm not a woman who doesn't find you attractive. The brunette gingerly rubbed the back of his neck at hearing this. It's not that. I just didn't think you liked me that way. The pink-haired girl deadpanned. I literally feel your body up on multiple occasions. Make sure that whenever you arrive at the support course studio to explode the door and flop in top of you so you get a feel for my body. And I talk to you more than anyone else. How in the world are you so dense? Izuku didn't have a response to this as all the puzzle pieces clicked in place. Mei Hatsume liked him and hadn't been as eccentric as he first thought and purposely showed him physical affection. God, he really was dense. What next? Uraraka has a crush on him or something? Literally forgetting how Kyoka ousted most of the girls who have a crush on him. but Nana and Banjo sure didn't and planned to tease the gelk out of him when the perfect opportunity came. Meanwhile at Ua dorms, Achu, Ochako Uraraka, who had been sick since coming to the dorms, sniffled and groaned. She was curled up in a cocoon of a blanket and was holding a 13 plushie. She sniffled one more time before speaking her mind in a nasally voice. I miss Deku-kun, I haven't gotten to talk to him since we got into the dorms. Sue, who was sitting next to her with a face mask, hummed at the brunette's words. Well, you're going to have to get used to sharing since Midori-chan is starting to get rather close to some of the girls in our class who are starting to show interest in him. Ochako whipped her head towards her amphibian friend. What? Since when? Achu, the green-haired frog girl shrugged. First off, bless you, and second, I'm pretty sure since the training camp incident, Yaomomo and Jiro-chan have gotten pretty close to him, and I heard Mina talking to Toru about Toru's feelings towards him. Kiro *. The brunette felt lightheaded and spoke hollowly. Oh no, I need to step my game up or Deku-kun will be taken away from me before I even get my chance with him. Sue quirked her head at this. From what I heard, you may still have a chance even if he starts dating. In a flash, Ochako grabbed her friend's shoulders, brought her close and spoke in a no-nonsense tone. Explain. Well, I heard that Izuku seems to be falling for both Yaomomo and Jiro-chan, and neither of them seem to be fighting each other about it, so they may become a polyamorous relationship soon. Kiro *. Ochako blinked in confusion. Polyamory. Sue croaked in amusement. Polyamory or a polyamorous relationship is where the participants are in love with not one singular person but multiple in the relationship. For instance, Jiro can be in love with Midori-chan but also Yaomomo, and the same could be said for the other two. The gravity-defying girl's jaw dropped and her world was flipped upside down, and she couldn't help but think, that sounds hot. Sue nodded. It is, and I'm intrigued if you wanted to join me in talking to them about new additions if they get together while they're on Island. Kiro. Ochako blinked. Did she say her thoughts out loud? Sue nodded again with another amused croak. Yes, and you're still doing it. Kiro *. Safe to say Ochako screamed into her pillow and was laughed at by Sue, who croaked cutely the entire time. The walk to the main ballroom was short as Izuku and his girls briefly met up with Melissa, who decided to tag along with them. Izuku took notice that she wasn't wearing her glasses and instead was wearing contacts and an elegant dress that he thought looked very good on her. He had complimented her and got a cheerful closed-eye smile in return. He also got a few nudges from Kyoka, who had a shit-eating grin, but he ignored her much to the punk girl's irritation. When they got to the main doors, Izuku didn't need to reach for the handle as it opened automatically when it took a quick scan of them. It surprised the whole group besides Melissa, who giggled at their surprised expressions. They walked into the room, getting some attention from its occupants. Some noticed Izuku for who he was, but for some reason a majority didn't. Is it the glasses? He thought. Nana projected herself, shaking her head into his mind. No. They're probably just not used to seeing you out of uniform. It happened to me a few times as well, but it won't last too long with this many people watching you, so they'll probably figure who you are soon. Izuku nodded to this and did in fact notice a few people go wide-eyed and whisper to the people around them, causing him to hear that they figured it out already. Well, it was nice while it lasted. The blue-haired teen thought sadly. They got to the table where David was and Melissa introduced the other girls to her father. David greeted them back and almost immediately got into a discussion with Mei on what to improve on for Izuku's hero costume. Apparently while he was in the shower earlier, David gave her a call from the card he gave him, and the two had talked briefly and came to an understanding on helping him become a better hero by making him better gear. So Izuku watched on as the three hero gear technicians talked and described some very outlandish gear and equipment that he never even thought about before. In this time, Momo had been approached by a few wealthy company CEOs and gave their respects to her and her family, who weren't even here mind you, but apparently still had enough pull that people would greet their daughter in hopes of getting on their good side. Kyoka and Izuku could only sit next to each other and share a look. They both weren't super smart to know what the Shield Duo and Mei were talking about, and on the other hand didn't have enough social etiquette to talk with posh businessmen like Momo, which just left them to talk to each other. So, this red stuff is pretty tasty, Izuku said, trying to break the ice. The punk girl in return nodded and spoke in an overly posh voice that only he could hear. Oh, indubitably, it's as if I am eating a summer day. Izuku snorted and chuckled at the purple-haired girl's antics before playing along. Yes indeed. I must say this gold-flaked water is to die for. The two had a good laugh before talking more genuinely. So what do I call you for a nickname now? I can't call you Green anymore like I did earlier in the day for obvious reasons, so what should I call you? At hearing the question, Izuku crossed his arms over his chest and hummed in thought. Well, I don't really know, I've never really called anyone nicknames besides you, Momo and Bakugo. The purpleette played with her ear jack before stopping dead in her tracks. She turned to look at a door across the ballroom and shook Izuku's arm, getting his immediate attention. Kyoka, what's? He was cut off as metal cylinders came out from under the floor and quickly shot out capture devices that wrapped around the heroes and security. They tried to capture Izuku but failed as he caught the multiple rings and destroyed them with his hands. The brunette and his group turned to the door Kyoka was looking at earlier to see it open and reveal men with guns, and the projector in the room turned on and shot out onto the main wall of the venue. Ah, seems I was right to worry about the famed Superman, but then again I bet you're not faster than a bullet to a person's head, so listen up you rich fucks, we're in charge here, so no funny business. By now the gunman had taken hostages and the man on the projector smiled evilly now that he had everyone's attention, but honestly Izuku was upset for an entirely different reason than the situation at hand. Why can't I go somewhere and not be attacked by villains? First the sludge villain, then the USJ, the internships, the damn summer camp, and now this bullshit? Honestly, I must have some of the worst luck ever. He thought to himself while trying to ignore the cheering of Nana and Banjo to quote-unquote, beat their asses ninth. Sighing, he looked at the gunman, causing them to gulp or flinch. He then turned his attention towards the screen to see who he could only guess would be the boss of these guys. Now, we got this whole building under our control, see, so no one is coming to help you. That leaves me with a few choice words for you all: don't play hero and don't fuck with my operation here or you all die. Kyoka couldn't help but roll her eyes at this and turned to Izuku. So, why haven't you saved us yet? Izuku turned his head towards her and replied, well, Rockstar, if you haven't forgotten, I'm still not a licensed hero yet, so I can't use my quirk to beat the shit out of these guys without legal backfire. However, David shook his head at this. Actually, since I-Island is its own place recognized by NATO, we have different rules compared to the other parts of the world, mainly in how self-defense works, and when it comes to heroes in training you're allowed to use your quirk if the situation is dire, and I'm pretty sure it is, so you have the full go-ahead to save us. The ninth user gave a "ah" before moving so fast no one saw him move and instead saw an after-image of him disappearing from where he once stood. Instead he was standing with the gunman all knocked out and tied up with shoelaces he got from said gunman. He stood over the bundle of idiots and pushed his glasses up. Alrighty then, seems like I didn't need to be faster than a bullet but rather faster than the reaction time it takes for a human to press the trigger, who knew? The man on the projector growled and slammed his hands onto the table in front of him and shouted out, you still won't stop me, boy. We have the whole building in our control, and by the time you get pasted the security measures we'll be long gone. With that the projector shut off and Izuku deadpanned. Did they forget I can use my super strength, heat vision and flight to get to them in less than a minute, or probably even half of that? The first user Yoichi sighed and responded back, ninth, villains like this are prideful and don't see the world for how it truly is. Now usually that's a good thing because it makes them easy to defeat, but it also makes them dangerous because they can be easily controlled by others. But it was then that Izuku had a thought, wait a minute, why didn't Danger Sense detect this? The fourth spoke up a little melancholic, we're trying to find out, but from what we've speculated it may be because the quirk's original use is to sense danger that's aimed at the host, but because you're basically invulnerable nothing is really a danger to you and won't be detected. It also doesn't help that the keywords training you're trying to do isn't finished yet, so you didn't pick anything up on your super hearing. Well, shit, we gotta fix that after this is all over. In another blur, Izuku released all of the heroes and security before going over to David and the girls. David, how do we take control back of the building? David thought about it for a moment and paced a few times before answering, well, the only way they gained control in the first place is to have a main access card and use it in the main security system that is at the top of the tower, and luckily enough I have such a card and know how to override their control. Izuku nodded and thought of a plan. Okay, I want you to come with me and do what you need to do. Momo, Kyoka, you two will help the heroes wherever you can in evacuating the civilians. Melissa, you and May try and jerry-rig a communication device to get the docks and airspace on lockdown in case these guys try and escape. The group nodded and went to do their task, leaving Izuku and David. The blue-haired teen unbuttoned his shirt and took his glasses off before asking David, so, How do you do with high speeds and heights? David blinked before replying. Good, I guess. Why are you? They disappeared in a blur and Izuku flew them out of the front of the building using his heat vision to cut a hole big enough for more than one person and quickly flew up into the sky. All the while David cried out in fear and panic. When they got high enough, Izuku used his X-ray vision to see into the building. He scouted it for the security room and found not only the man responsible for this whole situation but also David's colleague Samuel, who Izuku could hear using his enhanced hearing to listen in on their conversation. Samuel shouted in rage. You told me you were professionals, Wolfram, but this is a clusterfuck. The hostages are leaving the building and the airspace is being locked down. How are we supposed to escape with the device? The now named Wolfram glared at the man before taking a handgun out of his pocket and aiming it at Samuel. This wouldn't have happened if you looked at the fucking guest list. Now I have to fight the same person who captured my original employer who was out of my fucking league. Izuku narrowed his eyes at this and could hear the complaints of the past users, pissed that even after being captured and imprisoned all for one's influence was still apparent in the world. Deciding to not waste time, Izuku went into the top of the building's staircase and moved to the security room where the two men were located, his red eye beams hitting the gun in Wolfram's hand. The villain looked at Izuku with hate and clenched his fist. He slammed his hand in the ground, sending a pillar of steel in Izuku's direction, but the hero in training raised his fist to meet the pillar head on and broke it into pieces. Sorry, Wolfram, but you're not getting out of here unless it's in cuffs. Wolfram grit his teeth and looked down at the briefcase he was holding with the quirk boosting device. Smiling wickedly, he went to open it but was punched by Izuku and sent into the far wall of the room, and the briefcase landing at Izuku's feet. Samuel, seeing his chance, formed the best thankful smile he could muster. Oh, thank you, Superman. He kidnapped me and made me give him control of the building. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the man before turning to David, who was already at work undoing the system override. David, inform the cops that Samuel Abraham is in cahoots with the villain known as Wolfram. Samuel paled before trying to weasel his way out of the situation. I don't know what you're talking about, I would never. But before Samuel could continue lying, Wolfram got up out of the rumble he was in due to being sent into the wall. Oh, don't play with them, Samuel. You agreed to have me to come here and retrieve the quirk-enhancing device for my master, and you did it for the money we were offering you. Izuku saw that the villain had grasped a strange device that was laying next to him and was ready to intercept, but was surprised when Samuel took out a concealed weapon and tried shooting it at David, so on reflex he disarmed and knocked out Samuel before turning to Wolfram, who had the strange gun-shaped device aimed at him. And he had already pulled the trigger. Izuku was unable to dodge the light beam as it traveled at the speed of light and it hit him directly in the chest. Izuku worried for a moment, but danger sense didn't go off the entire time, which meant it didn't harm him, and after a few seconds of waiting nothing seemed to happen. Huh. Guess they don't make death rays like they used to. Izuku joked before sending an amused look at the villain. Wolfram, at seeing that the device didn't do a damn thing, threw it and used his quirk to cocoon himself in metal and travel through the walls and towards the roof. This caused Izuku to sigh and turn one last time to David. Watch out for Samuel. If you can tie him up while I deal with Wolfram, that would be for the best. David nodded and went over to a conveniently placed pile of rope that Izuku didn't see. Shaking his head at the irony, Izuku flew through the hall and through the staircase and onto the rooftop to see Wolfram yelling into a walkie-talkie. What do you mean the helicopter is grounded and you're surrounded by heroes? Izuku smiled and crossed his arms. Seems your friends aren't going to make it to the party. A shame, but then again I don't think you can tango with more than one partner, so maybe it was for the best. Wolfram turned and shouted in rage. This is all your fault. If you weren't here meddling in my business, none of this would have happened. Before either could start, the probably shot fight, a helicopter came onto scene, and to Izuku's surprise it was the news. Oh, for all might sake, I'm really starting to think Aizawa-sensei was right and the news really are vultures. Wolfram, seeing his chance, used his quirk to its limits to throw compressed steel wire, chunks of metal and even steel shaped into chains to wrap around Izuku, but the team just raised an eyebrow before breaking the bindings and charging the villain with a punch to the gut, making him spit up stomach vile. The villain dropped like a sack of potatoes, clutching his stomach and cursing Izuku with the remaining breath he could muster into his lungs as the wind had been knocked out of him. I hate you. Izuku just smiled and grabbed him. Oh, don't be like that. If it's any consolation, it was fun while it lasted. A quick chop to the neck incapacitating the villain and ended the villain's attack on the island. Izuku nodded at his handiwork and used flight to carry the villain down towards the front of the building and handing him over to the police. He made a quick trip to get Samuel as well and explained the crooked scientist's plan. The cops after hearing this looked at the scientist with rage and threw him in the prison van to take them down to the station for questioning and processing. With his work down, Izuku went to where he heard the girls and was hugged when he got into their line of sight. He hugged them back and turned to Melissa and told her that David would be down soon. Melissa was happy to hear that and waited with them for when her father would arrive. In that time they were questioned by police and they each gave their statements. Unfortunately, they were also pestered by the news crew who were in that helicopter earlier. The female reporter Izuku recognized from the American restaurant he and the others ate at earlier that day. Izuku and Momo took point in the small interview and gave them adequate responses and replies, but what surprised him was how the reporter nicknamed him, the Man of Steel, for his fight with Wolfram. He actually liked the sound of it, but his good mood was soured by the reporter asking about his relationship with Momo. Before he could respond, Momo gave him a kiss on the cheek and explained that they were in a relationship that also included Kyoka. The pink girl who was right next to Momo was a little embarrassed by the attention directed on her, but she didn't deny Momo's words, which was enough of an answer in and of itself. That was the end of the impromptu interview, however, as David arrived and shooed the reporters and news crews away, making the teens very grateful for his help. The rest of the night was relatively short as the group went out for some dinner since theirs was ruined by villains. They ate at a Korean barbecue place and shortly after headed to their hotel to rest for the night. But it was as Izuku slept that a strange thing happened inside One for All. The device shot at him was a quirk splicer, but due to how strong and adaptive the quirk it tried to affect was, it instead took in the splicing energy and transformed it into something else. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Inside One for All, Izuku sighed as Nana cackled away at their new circumstance. Apparently that weird device disentangled her and now allowed her to come out of his body in a physical form where she could eat, talk, touch and feel in. She had been boasting for the past hour about using it to tease the shit out of him and his girlfriends, which in turn made Izuku ignore her and speak with the fourth in hopes to put parameters on Danger Sense to help him actually use it. The inside of the quirk had changed dramatically from what it used to look like. Instead of the floating concrete slab on the middle of a void, the place was now a nice hotel-like structure with a beach, pool and everything else that a hotel could provide. The past users would use a TV in the main lounge to watch through his eyes and or watch his memories to watch TV shows he saw or listen to music he had inside of his memories. In all, the place was pretty nice, the core of the quirk being the sun that was able to be accessed via the basement where the main controls, as they were called, were located. Hikage, the fourth user, had gone to the main controls to try and fix Danger Sense, but instead found out about Nana's new condition and much to everyone's annoyance had not stopped cheering and rubbing it into their faces. And I'm not stopping there. Whenever he's in the shower we're going to do it like rabbits until I'm satisfied, shouted out the raven-haired woman with a crazed perverted smile that unnerved them all. Izuku sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Nana, for the love of Kami, please stop talking about all the sex you want to have with me. Nana turned her head towards him. How about no? Quote. I wish quirks weren't absolute bullshit and this wasn't a possibility. The blue-haired teen groaned as he started to fade in a sign of him wake up and heard Nana cackle to herself. His life was going to get even weirder than it already was and he couldn't do a damn thing about it. A few days later, the group had gotten to know Nana rather well and it was very, very embarrassing for all those involved as she appeared like a ghost fully nude and introduced herself the first time they all met. Safe to say Momo's mind had gone into shock and Kyoka gave a thumbs up and said a small, nice, before getting up from bed to use the bathroom. Mei was more interested in studying the seventh user and later that day did a full inspection on the ghost woman with the shield duo to get a reading on what fully happened. Izuku didn't understand a thing of what they said, so they dumbed it down to say Nana was able to project herself out of One for All and the only downside was that she couldn't leave his immediate surroundings and could only walk about 10 feet away from him before disappearing back into the quirk. She could also stay out as long as she wanted, which was Izuku's new personal hell, as she groped him and teased him like midnight on crack, and for some reason the girls found it amusing and didn't help him in handling her. But their time on the island wasn't all bad, as a few days of rest was nice for them all, and by the time they had to leave, Izuku had gotten very close with Melissa and her father and told them that they could count on him if they ever needed help or just wanted company. Mei had gotten her eye for her effort in saving the island by hacking the system and coordinating the heroes to surround the helicopter the villains were going to use as an escape. She had been talking about making a robot with it, or maybe it was an android. Izuku didn't really know the difference, so he let it be. But it was on their arrival back that they were immediately met by a problem. Apparently saving island is a big deal and made Izuku even more fans and famous, as the second they got off the tarmac they were swarmed by fans and reporters. Izuku was only saved by the quick arrival of Aizawa and Toshinori with Nezu on the latter's shoulder. They got them all out of there and into a black SUV to take them back to Ua. Nezu looked at the group of teens and spoke in his usual cheery tone. "Well, Midoriya, you sure have luck with villains. I'm inclined to believe wherever you go you're going to encounter villains and make a spectacle out of it all." The blue-haired teen shuffled a little in his seat. "Sorry, I'll try not to do that, but I can't promise anything." Aizawa huffed at this but didn't say anything as he continued to drive. Toshinori, who was in the front passenger seat, turned and gave his own thoughts on the matter. "From the report we received, this Wolfram fellow worked for All for One. Is that true?" Izuku nodded solemnly in response, causing Toshinori to sigh and lean back into his seat. "It seems that man still has pieces on the board. There is still work to do in undoing his web of allies." The occupants in the vehicle were silent to dwell on the words of the previous number one hero, and it was only when Nezu cleared his throat did they get out of their thoughts. Nezu, who was seated on the center console, turned to Izuku and his group before speaking aloud. "That is exactly why the HPSC President Makima and I have agreed that Izuku Midoriya shall be given a part-time pro-hero license to help when he is needed." They were all shocked at hearing this, but none more than Izuku himself. "But sir," he exclaimed. Nezu raised his paw to stop him and continue. "It's already been decided, Midoriya. There are some small restrictions, however, like how you have to have good grades and not be failing any of your classes. Secondly, you won't be being paid, and any damage to property you make will be on the HPSC to fix, so it's a give and take sort of deal." The ninth user wasn't able to speak. He was basically going to be a hero way earlier than he ever thought he would be, and all he had to do was have good grades, which he already had, and due to his brain being enhanced by One for All, it would be smooth sailing for him. I accept and hope to make you all proud." The car had a bright atmosphere as everyone smiled at Izuku. Even the ever-strict Aizawa was happy for his student and had a small grin hidden under his scarf. But it was when they arrived at the dorms of UA that Izuku realized something. His relationship with Momo and Kyoka had been broadcast by the news. His mother had the habit of watching the news because of his own habits of watching hero news almost daily, and she was part of the staff, so they would have told her about the incident already. In other words, his mother knew about his relationship with his girlfriends, and she was currently standing at the front of the dorms with tears in her eyes and a small shaky smile. "Uh-oh," was all he got out of his mouth before his mother shouted, "Izuku, wives, grandbabies." She dove into him and he caught her in his arms, causing him to be drenched in tears and his girlfriends to blush at what his mother had said. The son of Inko Midoriya rubbed her back and tried to comfort her to stop her tears, but when he tried introducing the girls as his girlfriends, she started right back up again. "This is going to be rough," he thought to himself before it got even worse by the doors of the dorms flinging open to reveal his classmates. "Midoriya, Deku-kun, Midori, Deku." They all yelled out in unison. "Oh fuck me," Izuku cursed in his head. But that just made Nana mentally whisper into his ear, "Oh, in front of your own mother and all your friends. Well, I don't mind giving a good show." "Oh Kami, damn it." Our protagonist stared blankly while sitting on the couch of the common room. He had explained and answered every question the class had, to the point he even let Nan out to talk and greet Toshinori, which caused the man to faint on the spot. In all, he was pretty tired mentally, but the good news was that he now had a hero license and danger sense had been fixed to actually sense danger around him and a good chunk of the surrounding area. So why was he sitting blankly, you may ask? Well, that was in due part to his mother showing his two girlfriends his baby photo album along with the rest of the class. Yup, he was dead inside, and on turning away from the cooing and swooning group he looked at Toshinori, who was still out cold. Apparently Nana, Mina and Toru hit it off as they had started stacking random objects on top of the retired number 1 hero's head in an impressive display. He smiled at the sight and took his phone out to take a picture, and after taking the photo he put his phone back and decided to get one of his super secret snacks that he hid so no one would eat them. Standing up from the couch he walked over towards the cabinet in the kitchen and made sure no one was looking so he could fly up and look at the top of the cabinet, moving the fake bland cereal box to the side and looking inside. To his disappointment he had forgotten that he needed to go and resupply on more snacks, so after putting the cereal box back and landing on the ground he walked off towards his room. He absent-mindedly noted that Nana vanished when he got too far from her and she appeared next to him with a pout, in her own words, ruining all her fun. Izuku rolled his eyes at her and continued on to his room where he got dressed in the suit and glasses that he wore to the party at Islamdi. When asked by Nana why he was wearing it he replied that it was a disguise for him when not wanting to be noticed for who he was outside of UA since it actually worked to a degree. With that said he went downstairs and gave a kiss to his 2 girlfriends before heading out. He had told them where he was going and was told to get them some things which he agreed to get since he was going out already in the first place. So he left to the nearest convenience store which was a few blocks away from UA and near a highly populated area and active road. He smiled to himself as his plan to be in disguise working like a charm. Who knew old comics from the pre-quirk era would be useful in this day and age, but as he was patting himself on the back he made it to the store, which surprised him at how fast he had arrived. But not wanting to waste good fortune Izuku headed inside and bought an assortment of treats. Izuku had gotten himself Pocky and blueberry muffins while he got Momo and Kyoka a chocolate cake and strawberry-flavored Pocky. But that wasn't all he had gotten. He had heard of Ochako getting sick this past week and felt terrible that he couldn't be there with her while he was at Island. So he got her some mochi to hopefully cheer her up, and since he knew Sue had helped take care of Ochako he got his amphibian friend a bag of her favorite powdered donuts. After paying for the treats Izuku walked out of the store and adjusted his glasses. His smile was still as bright as ever, but when he started walking down the street back to UA danger sense kicked in. Time seemed to slow to a crawl and he turned as he heard the start of a shriek from a woman with brown hair and teal eyes with a simple dress on. The woman in question seemed to be a mother of a child who had just ran into the road to retrieve a stuffed animal that probably fell from her grasp from what Izuku could see. In an instant Izuku went into motion, setting off from where he stood and got to the girl before the box truck that was approaching her could reach her. He grabbed the girl in a princess carry and snatched the stuffed animal from the air, all while keeping his groceries safe. The truck got closer as he got into a crouch and leapt up and over it, and slowly drifted in the air as he didn't want the girl in his grasp to feel all of the friction and pressure from his quick movement in grabbing her. So instead he let the air shield that came with his flight to disperse any pressure or friction her body would have gone through and kept her safe. It was also right then that time seemed to flow back to normal. The box truck that almost killed the girl screeched to a halt and came to a stop, but sliding way past where the girl would have been. The mother who had screamed continued to cry out, thinking her daughter had been hit. But when the girl in Izuku's arm looked up at him and realized she was safe, she cheered, and this caused the mother to look up and gasped in surprise, relief, and joy as she saw Izuku in all his glory with her little girl and fell to her knees with tears spotting her vision. Izuku floated down gently to her and set the little girl down with her stuffed elephant. He then stood to his full height and took his glasses off to give her a stern but not too harsh look. "Now young lady, I know your little elephant is important to you, but you can't just go into the street like that or you could be hurt." The little girl looked at him with awe but then looked down sadly at hearing his words. Izuku, upon seeing her reaction, kneeled down to her level and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, but next time be more careful. Your mother would hate it if you got hurt, so be careful so you don't make her sad." The girl looked up to Izuku before turning to her mother, who was still in tears. She turned sad again before looking back to Izuku. "I promise, Mither, I'll be more careful," she said with a small lisp from her top tooth having fallen out rather recently. Izuku smiled and patted her on the head before standing up. He turned his attention to the mother and gave her a helping hand to help her stand. "It's all right, miss, your daughter is safe and that's all that matters." The woman nodded with tears now fully falling from her eyes. She went and hugged her daughter, who apologized for running into the street. It was then that the people around them started to cheer and move over to the three. but Izuku, not wanting to make a scene, said a quick goodbye to the mother and daughter duo before flying off towards Ua. This however made a few connect the dots about who Izuku was and immediately shouted in recognition, causing the rest to realize who he was, and some even posted pictures and videos of the renowned Superman in action to save a young girl. Izuku didn't think about the impact of his actions and wouldn't find out about it until a bit later, but for now he would simply give his treats to his girlfriends before heading over to Ochako's room. In Ochako's room, the brunette was asleep with drool pooling underneath her face and onto her pillow. Her face was a bit of a mess and her clothes were nothing more than a black tank top and pink panties. Her best friend Suyu was sitting at her friend's coffee table and reading a novel she had been recommended by Momo. Say what you will about the Ravenette's spicy taste in novels, but she sure did have some gems in her large library of books. The book she was currently reading was about a princess who says, "Fuck it," to being royalty and having to deal with snobbish dickheads. She then goes and travels the world meeting friends and allies and even a lover who was a prince to a Viking clan. In all, it was a great read and she was already on the third book of the series, but when the door opened as she was reading a particularly exciting scene, she shut it quickly and turned to the door with a small blush. "Oh hey Sue, I knocked but you didn't answer," said the blue-haired hunk of a man. "Oh wow, he looks hot in a suit and tie," the frog-quirked girl thought. Sue croaked before answering, "It's fine, I wasn't paying attention as I had my mind stuck in my book Kiro." Izuku nodded in understanding before turning to Ochako and freezing upon laying his eyes on her. Sue looked over to the brown-haired girl and knew she fucked up at not covering her, even warning Izuku about the brunette's current wardrobe or lack thereof. But before she could apologize to Izuku or cover the girl in question, she heard him speak in a hushed voice, "Beautiful." Sue stared at the blue-haired young man and thought, wait. What? She literally has a pool of drool sticking her face to the pillow and he still thinks she looks beautiful? Well, color me impressed and slap me with a meat stick. Izuku's face turned red at seeing Sue's curious look and he cleared his throat into his fist. Sorry about that, don't tell Ochako I said that. I don't think she could handle it and would probably start floating on us. Sue looked at him blankly before nodding. Sure, but why are you here? Not that I don't like you coming over, but shouldn't you be with Yaomomo and Jiro-chan? The ninth user of One for All shrugged. Well, I just spent a few days with them, so I wanted to give them their space and come see how Ochako is doing. Is she doing better or still as bad as when I left? The frog girl smiled as much as her expressionless face could muster and replied back, she's doing better and should be okay to go to class in a few days when they start, if not sooner. Izuku smiled brightly at the news. That's great. Oh, and I almost forgot. He took the bag from his hand and took out the mochi and small bag of donuts. Here, I went to the store and got you two some treats. And like a zombie smelling brains, the groggy corpse that was Ochako Uraraka sat up and groaned like the undead. She swiveled slowly to look at the mochi and started to crawl over to it. Meanwhile, Izuku and Sue watched on in a transfixed and curious manner as Ochako got to the mochi and tore the container open with her bare hands, the plastic tearing like paper. She then started to stuff her mouth with the mochi like a chipmunk storing their food in their cheeks, and the funny thing was she still wasn't fully awake yet, which was a feat in itself. Is she always like this when she's not with the rest of the group? Izuku asked Sue without turning away from the mochi devourer. Sue didn't answer for a moment, trying to think of if she ever saw Ochako do this, and she couldn't say she had, so she shrugged. Izuku took her silent reply with a nod of understanding, but as he watched the girl devour the mochi like Kirby on crack, he muttered to himself, cute. And like a record scratch, the green-haired girl sitting next to him turned quickly and looked at him with a raised eyebrow before saying, you have a strange taste in women, Midoriya-chan Kiro. She croaked in amusement as Izuku blushed, but then again he couldn't retort that the girls he was interested in were definitely not normal by any standards. Momo was rich as hell with no understanding of humility when it came to accidentally showing off said wealth. Kyoka had a tomboyish sense of humor and an addiction to music merchandise, as he had found out recently. And those were just the two he was dating and currently getting to know better, who knew how Mei, Sue, Ochako or Toru were like when comfortable and willing to share their more bizarre traits. So yes, he did like girls who weren't normal by any means, but he didn't see that as a bad thing, as it made them all unique and extremely lovable in their own special way. What Izuku didn't know was that he had started mumbling his thoughts again, and Sue heard everything he had been saying, and didn't waste the opportunity to record every single word of it. She wasn't alone, however, as Ochako had awoken from her zombie state after filling her mouth with mochi and was blushing hard at her state of dress and having him see her stuff her face like that. But more importantly, both girls had heard most of what he had been thinking except for who he was crushing on, but they didn't really need to think about it too hard to know most of the girls he was interested in by taking an account of the girls he was close to. It was only when Nana appeared and smacked him upside the head that he stopped his muttering and focused on his surroundings. He saw both girls blushing and knew right then and there that he screwed up. "I'm just gonna go. Hope you enjoy the mochi and donuts." He tried getting out the door, but Nana pulled him back inside and sat him down in front of the two, which only happened because he had forgot he could have easily overpowered the woman in his embarrassed state, leaving Ochako and Sue to look at the young man before speaking. "Deku-kun, are you interested in us, wanna fuck?" Sue. Both Izuku and Ochako shouted while Nana cackled in the background. Sue tilted her head at the two. "What? I thought we were on the same page here." Ochako facepalmed before yelling at her best friend, "Okami, why are you so horny?" Sue just shrugged in response. "I have the ability of most frogs. I may not have horns, but I can definitely be defined as a horn-y frog." At that, Nana burst out laughing even more and fell to her knees in laughter, her eyes pouring tears and her body shaking from laughing so hard. Izuku and Ochako were blushing but also deadpanned at the pun, and only after a few seconds to collect themselves did they start chuckling and joining in on the laughter. They all enjoyed the tender moment, and a few minutes later it died down, leaving them in a comfortable silence. Izuku, since he calmed down enough to speak, decided to take the lead. "Okay, to answer Ochako first, I do in fact like you both in that way, along with Mei, Toru, and of course Momo and Kyoka, with a few others I'm not willing to share just yet. And Sue. I won't be doing that until I get more comfortable with Momo and Kyoka first, and if you somehow join us in our relationship and want that to happen, then and only then can you speak with the girls about planning for that to happen." Ochako blushed so red she was the same shade as a tomato, while Sue merely nodded in understanding. Upon seeing their reactions, Izuku sighed in relief before he started talking with them and asking how their time had been since he left Tai Island. Apparently nothing of real importance happened except for an incident where Monoma of Class 1B had came over and harassed the class, making Izuku rub his forehead, wondering why the blonde was so upset with them this time. Sue answered this unspoken question a second later, explaining how the blonde was jealous of Izuku and proclaimed that his class would still surpass theirs. So in other words, Monoma got butt hurt and wanted to bark at them as per usual. In all honesty, Izuku was glad he went to Island if it meant skipping the blonde's monologue and instead spent time with his girls and Melissa. Of course the villain attack wasn't desirable, but better than Monoma any day. That sucks. Hopefully he chills out, but that's highly unlikely to happen unless I talk to Kon-sensei and complain about one of his students harassing us unprovoked. Izuku said, and honestly thought about doing it since even he was getting tired of Monoma's antics. They continued to complain about Monoma in a sort of therapeutic way to vent their frustration about the blonde, even joking with Nana, who Izuku introduced for a bit until Izuku said his goodbyes and left back downstairs. It was probably around noon when he entered the common room and put his snacks in the pantry in his hidden spot after getting a box of Pocky for himself, after which he went over to the couch where he sat next to Toru and greeted her. "Hey Toru, want a stick of Pocky?" The invisible girl blushed, which only Izuku could see due to his enhanced vision. She nodded shyly, grabbing the offered treat before taking small bites out of it. She thanked him and turned her attention to the TV, which was on some random channel. Apparently someone had checked the news because it was currently on the news channel of all things. "We have new information brought by the Coast Guard that an ongoing search for a lost cruise ship off the coast of Japan in the Pacific Ocean is still underway. Heroes have tried finding the ship but have not made any new progress in their search." Toru frowned at this. "That's horrible. I hope they find those people soon." It was then, however, that she felt a breeze. Turning to the side, she saw Izuku was gone and her head tilted in confusion before a light bulb appeared over her head in understanding a few seconds later as she understood what had happened. She turned to the others in the room who hadn't noticed yet and wondered if she should mention the blue-haired boy had gone to most likely search for a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, but she soon decided against it since she knew he'd probably be back soon anyways. So she instead took Izuku's Pocky box he left on the couch and started to eat them while she waited for his return, and blushed when she thought she sounded like a housewife waiting for her husband to return home from work. In the Pacific Ocean, a ship was trying its best to stay afloat while being hammered with heavy rain and vicious waves. the thunder echoing in the sky as the ship's captain furiously shouted commands to his crew. Wave starboard side. Winds coming in from the east. Boom! The wave hit the side of the ship, causing it to almost turn over, but just barely straightened out, letting the crew breathe a sigh of relief. However, their relief was short-lived as an even bigger wave seemed to appear out of nowhere and was heading right at them. The captain cursed under his breath and shouted into his radio to alert his crew and passengers of the imminent danger. All crew and passengers brace for impact. I repeat, BEACE for impact. A crewman next to the captain looked towards his higher-up and spoke in a hysteric voice. But sir, that wave will kill us. Why even tell the others to brace themselves if we're all going to die? The captain turned to look his helmsman directly in the eye, because at least they'll die with hope. The crewman didn't say anything back before turning to look at the wave ahead of them, and he choked a cry of dismay, trying not to show his horror at the situation, knowing his death was coming. The captain, seeing this reaction, also moved to look at the wave and turned the radio on once more to speak to everyone on board. Another wave coming in on T-10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 0. His count, however, was interrupted as a red beam of heat hit the approaching wave, cutting it horizontally and drastically dispersing it into barely half of its original strength and safety, hitting the ship. The crew, after seeing the waves safely pass over them, cheered and hollered in sheer joy of living to see another day, and increased in volume when they caught sight of a man in a hero costume floating just in front of the helm of the ship. Hastily the figure flew to a door leading to the helm where the captain and his helmsman were. On being allowed in by one of the crew, he entering and was almost tackled, but the hero stopped that with his outstretched hands and carefully made his way to the captain. Said hero was none other than our protagonist Izuku Midoriya, also known as Superman. The young man, when getting to the captain, gave him a handshake and spoke to the man in a professional manner. Hello caption, I'm Izuku Midoriya, but you can call me Superman. Now I wish I could talk more, but we don't know how long until another wave of that size comes, so I'll be short with you. Where is the nearest place this ship can get to for you and your passengers to be evacuated from the vessel? The captain shook the young man's hands before nodding in respect and answering back. We were trying to get to the shipping dock in San Diego, California, but due to the ungodly storm we aren't too sure where we even are anymore on our map. Izuku nodded along to this before he turned away and used his enhanced vision combined with his X-ray vision to look to the east where he believed the US would be. It took him a few tries, but after a minute or two he was able to locate the United States. Turning back to the captain, he spoke, "All right. I'm going to go under your ship and use my enhanced strength along with my black whip ability to carry your ship to the US and out of this storm. Tell your crew to get inside if they aren't, and for them along with the passengers to hold on tight." The captain's eyes bugged out at this for a moment but quickly returned to normal as he stood straight and saluted the young man in front of him. "Thank you, Superman, I'll get on it right away." Izuku smiled happily and saluting back in return. He then made a quick exit out of the ship the way he came from and flew up into the air before diving into the water. Moving underneath the cruise ship was easy, and he went directly to the center of it and braced his hands on the keel. He then used Black Whip to cover the ship to disperse the pressure and weight from what he was about to do. In the meanwhile, the captain had relayed his orders to the crew and those on board to be careful and brace themselves for any more shifting of the ship, and that help had arrived and was going to help them get to the nearest docking bay. The passengers of the ship did as they were told, but were also hopeful that they were finally saved and everything was going to be all right. Izuku, who had heard what the captain said over his radio, waited a few moments for the people on the ship to get themselves prepared. After a minute he started to lift the ship and use flight to float himself and the cruise ship out of the water. He stopped only when he reached what he considered an appropriate height and slowly but surely picking up speed flew towards the US and out of the storm. Back in the UA dorms, Toru had eaten about half of Izuku's pocky before the news channel changed to the main newscaster with the name, Hana Uraraka, which made the girl wonder if she was related to her classmate Ochako. "Thank you, Ino-san, but we've just gotten breaking news on that missing cruise ship that had gone missing in the Pacific. I'm reporting to you all at home that the ship has now arrived off the coast of California, but the real kicker is that the man to save the cruise ship, and yes, you've got that right, the man responsible for saving this ship was none other than Izuku Midoriya, or as the world has come to know him as Superman." Toru's mouth stopped just short of biting the pocky as it hung wide open in her hand due to her surprise became lax, causing her to drop said chocolate stick onto her lap, and shortly after her eyes widened and she just started pointing at the TV while stuttering. T. Momo and Kyoka, who were a little bit a ways from the invisible girl but still close enough to hear her, overheard her stutter and turned to look at her, and upon seeing her shaking in her sleeve, pinpointing to the fact she was pointing at the TV, they both glanced over at whatever got her so surprised. However, they reacted similarly or worse in Kyoka's case, as the rocker girl's jacks started spasming and on instinct shot over to their favorite victim, causing the blonde boy known as Kaminari Denki to shout in pain before falling over out of his chair. This had two effects, as everyone in the common room turned to Denki before turning to Kyoka, who in turn made them all look at what she was looking at, which was none other than the TV that was displaying their newly made blue-haired friend and fellow classmate Izuku Midoriya lifting a cruise ship wrapped in his black whip and flying it to the port in the city of San Diego. And the second effect was turning Denki to jelly, as his body was slumped over unconscious and totally missing out on seeing the epic scene of his classmate carry a giant freaking ship and saving the day like an old-school superhero. Poor Denki. The sight of the San Diego port was electrifying, as reporters and the port's workers were making a buzz in the area, all while the cruise ship that had gone missing in the Pacific floated just a few feet away from them in the harbor. These weren't the only people of importance, however, as citizens and heroes were also at the port watching as the Man of Steel, also known as Superman, gently floated down into the harbor and set the ship in the water. One of these heroes was the famous #1 of America Star and Stripes, aka Kathleen Bates, a tall, muscular blonde woman known for her admiration for the #1 hero of Japan, All Might. A big splash of seawater shot into the air as the ship made contact with the water, the sea displaced itself under its weight, pushing down on and splashing those on the docks. The ship rocked back and forth for a few moments until it came to a complete rest in the now calm water, the water surrounding it still splashing due to the energy still inside of it. Quickly the men on board the ship got outside onto the deck and threw the ropes to the awaiting port workers, who tied the ropes off. Right after that, the ship crew slowly but surely extended a drawbridge, allowing the passengers who were ushered out to exit the ship and get onto the port and emergency personnel. While this was all happening, reporters took pictures and made comments to the TV crews in their stations about the situation. That was until another splash was heard and the caped figure known emerged. Superman floated in the air with the wind fluttering his cape, making him seem like an otherworldly figure, causing a silence to engulf the crowd of people. Soon enough, cameras started flashed quickly taking his picture, and one of the heroes on scene called out to him in English, making the young hero turn to said person. "Superman, over here." Superman, aka Izuku, turned to the woman as he was fluent in English due to various bidding wars he was in when he was younger for All Might merchandise. Not his proudest reason for learning English, but at least he had a few premium edition All Might posters and figurines from his endeavors. But shaking that thought away, Izuku floated over to the woman and landed in front of her. He quickly realized who she was, and even with his recently acquired composure, that didn't stop him from making a highly surprised expression form on his face. "Star and Stripes, it's a pleasure to meet you, I'm a big fan," Izuku said in perfect English with no Japanese accent, much to the woman's own surprise. However, it vanished as she smiled wide and responded back, "Pleasure's all mine, but I gotta give you my thanks. We weren't sure if we would be able to find and safely recover the ship with how big of a radius the storm encompassed." The young man's sheepish response met the woman, "Why yeah, I didn't expect to be helping so soon after receiving my Pro-Hero license from the Hero Public Safety Commission of Japan. But I am glad I was able to help. I rushed over to the Pacific after hearing about the situation on the news. From there I was able to locate the ship using my super hearing, and I'm sure you can guess what came next." Star and Stripes chuckled and patted his shoulder similarly to what an older sibling would do. "I sure can. Great work for a newbie. I'm glad to see you working so good on your first day." Izuku blushed at the strange act of kinship and rubbed the back of his neck. "Thanks, but..." He was cut off as reporters started to make a racket demanding to talk to Izuku and were trying to force their way to the pair. However, upon seeing this, Izuku's sweat dropped and turned back to the #1 hero of America. "Sorry to save and fly, but I rather not get hounded by reporters. I haven't had the class on how to deal with them yet. Hopefully we can work together in the future sometime, since I'd love to work with a fellow All Might pupil and fan." He extended his hand to Star and Stripes, who looked at it and then up to him, her mouth forming her iconic smile as she extended her own and grasped his. "That's understandable. No hero likes the press except for the glory hogs, and yeah, that would be great. I'll see you around, Superman, and make sure to tell All Might I said hi." Izuku gave a genuine smile of his own and nodded his head before releasing her hand and taking a step back. Almost immediately afterwards he shot up into the sky and a sonic boom echoed when he was high enough to reach past Mach 1 without hurting anyone's hearing. The number one hero of America couldn't help but smile in admiration at this, even when the wind made her perfectly made hair and cape fly backwards. "See ya when you turn into the number one of Japan, kid, I'll be waiting for you, but on second thought I might just pull a few strings to work with you earlier than that because it'd be more fun." With that last thought in mind she rubbed her chin and walked off towards her crew, also not wanting to deal with the vultures also known as reporters, but neither she or Izuku would know how impactful a picture of the number one hero of America shaking hands with the disciple of All Might would mean to the world. With Izuku flying over the sea, our protagonist was heading back home until his heightened hearing heard something to the southwest of Japan, in other words near the southern part of China. Izuku hummed before saying his thoughts aloud. "I'm already out, so it wouldn't be too bad if I go check on that. Right? Probably, I mean it's not like I'm forgetting anything." With that said, Izuku diverted his course and heading to his next destination, not thinking about how he would irritate a certain sleep-deprived teacher of his who was completely done with what his life has become. At Heights Alliance dorms inside UA. Speaking of which, the teacher of Class 1A walked inside the dorms holding a suit jacket with pants, tie and white dress shirt with shoes bundled up in his arms. "All right, which one of you threw your clothes outside the dorms and didn't pick them up?" He spoke to the whole class that were crowded around in the common room of the dorms surrounding the TV, but when none of them noticed him, Aizawa's eye twitched and he walked over to see what had gotten them also enraptured. However, when he pushed past Mineta and Kaminari to see his number one problem child setting a cruise ship into the port of San Diego's water and shaking hands with the number one hero of America, even he wasn't sure how to react. So after a few minutes to digest and form a plan of action, he dropped the clothes onto the floor uncaringly and turned around to walk out of the dorms. He even ignored Iida calling him, as he was simply done with all the bullshit that had been this half of the year. Yet before exiting the dorms he spoke over his shoulder loud enough for all of his problem children present to hear. "I'm too tired and mentally exhausted to handle this shit at the moment, so in the meantime Yaoyorozu is in charge and will inform problem child number 1 to head to Nezu's office when he returns." When Aizawa exited the dorms, it was then that something popped inside his head. His mind raced over and over again about the fact he wasn't even finished with 1 year with his class of Hell Spawns and had 2 more years after this one was done. He shivered involuntarily and the thought of quitting raced through his mind for a second, but in a sick twist of fate which he really should have already guessed would happen by now, he received a text from Nezu stating he still had 6 more years in his contract with no way of getting out of it. The rest of the class that watched their teacher's actions watched as he screamed to the heavens for a solid minute before slumping his shoulders and walking away. They shrugged before going back to watching the news coverage about Izuku and how the news anchors talked about his future of being an amazing hero like All Might or even better. Bakugo at some point couldn't contain himself and yelled about being the best and that Deku wouldn't surpass him before stomping off towards the gym to get stronger. Kirishima had followed him saying how manly Izuku was and with a few others feeling pumped to not let Izuku surpass them too easily and followed along, even if he had already surpassed them long ago. This left Momo, Kyoka, Toru and a few others around the TV and couch area mingling with each other, with Momo at some point sitting down next to Toru with Kyoka following suit. The Ravenet looked over at the Pocky laid on the invisible girl's lap and raised a brow. "Toru-chan, is that Izuku's Pocky?" Toru snapped out of her daze and looked to Momo and then to the Pocky, which caused her to blush. Maybe." Momo giggled at the usually boisterous girl's shyness. "It's okay dear, I don't mind and I don't think Izuku will either." The invisible girl nodded. "Why yes, but I didn't ask him so I'm still a little worried." This time Kyoka spoke up, eating the treat Izuku had bought her earlier. "He won't be mad, he's pretty chill like that. Besides it seems like he's pretty busy at the moment." She pointed to the screen showing that Izuku had saved a bridge from falling and saved a group of people from a burning building in the span of 5 minutes. Each of the girls looked on in silence, mentally coming to terms with what they were watching. "Is it just me or does his suit make his butt look bigger?" Momo blushed and turned to Kyoka. "Kyo." The punk girl shrugged at her girlfriend's reaction. "Oh come on. You can't tell me it doesn't make him look extra thick with 3 C's. Momo continued to glare with her blush just as dark as her old costume, making Kyoka sigh. "Fine, fine, but when he gets back I'm complimenting him and his cake while you sit and eat yours." Rolling her eyes, Momo leaned into the couch and let out a deep breath at seeing Izuku go around the world saving people and stopping crime while he was at it. This did make her wonder though, does his license let him work in foreign countries? Only time would tell, or Nezu if she was right on who would tell her boyfriend if he had just gone and broke international law on accident. 30 minutes later, Boom Izuku's flying form shattered the sound barrier as he approached Ua. He had just finished with a building collapse and was heading home with his hero suit full of various scratches and scuff marks. After all he had done so far today, he was glad he had a pack of Pocky waiting for him and was also needing to talk to Nezu about something he had thought of while on his patrol around the world. Coincidentally, he had the same thought as Momo of whether or both he had accidentally gone over the other country's jurisdiction or whatever they called it. He honestly worried he stepped over the line with his hero license and didn't think of the consequences, but then again he wouldn't feel bad breaking a few laws if it meant saving people. With that thought in mind, he saw Ua in his sight. Slowing down his flight to get under the sound barrier, Izuku reached the school easily enough and landed in front of his dorm building. He landed as soft as he could, making a thumb on the ground. Seeing the small indents of his feet, he knew he'd need to get a bit more experience before being able to land the way he wanted. But that was for another time. He needed a quick shower and to change into a new set of clothes before taking his suit to Mei to be cleaned and repaired. Looking around for his discarded clothes, Izuku noted that his clothes had gotten picked up by someone. He guessed it was one of his classmates and shrugged it off. The doors of the dorms opened and Izuku walked inside to see a basically barren common room with the only occupants being Momo, Kyoka and Toru sitting on the couch. "Hey you three. Where's everyone else?" the blue-haired teen asked, being mindful to not get ash on the carpet by floating an inch above the ground. The three turned to him with smiles, in Toru's case a shy smile. Momo being the one to speak caused Izuku to turn and focus on her. "Well, most left to train after seeing you save that cruise ship. The rest went to their rooms or to go and do other activities." Izuku nodded to this and turned to the pile of his clothes thrown onto the ground of the common room in a small bundle. He blinked before shrugging and going to pick it up. He bent over and Kyoka whistled at the sight when his cape flew to the side from an unknown wind, causing Momo to elbow her in the side. Izuku turned around with his clothes in hand and tilted his head. "What's going on?" Momo with a big blush shook her head. "Nothing. Nothing at all. Why don't you go and shower? We'll still be here to talk when you're finished." Izuku nodded hesitantly, thinking something was off, but didn't push it before floating over to the stairs, leaving a snickering Kyoka and two blushing girls behind. Momo, having waited for Izuku to leave, turned to Toru and smiled teasingly. "So, Toru-chan, you like Izuku in a romantic way, correct?" The invisible girl's face turned flushed and she squeaked, but just a second later they all heard a loud noise from the second floor and turned to see Izuku roll onto the bottom of the stairs, having just fell on all the stairs leading all the way to the second floor. Their eyes went wide as Izuku shot up, his forgotten clothes flying into the air. He looked at the girls with his mouth agape before stuttering, "Th Thuan th what?" Toru's horrified red face met his own and Izuku gulped. "Why, you like me?" The invisible girl felt like dying as she grabbed her arm and rubbed it shyly while her blush stayed on her face. It took her a few moments before she lifted her gaze to him and answered truthfully. "Why, yes I do." Izuku wasn't sure how to react to this, so he turned to Momo and Kyoka. The two were looking at their boyfriend while eating their treats he had bought them earlier. Upon seeing him turn to them, Momo with a mouthful of cake waved her hand at him in a "go on" motion, while Kyoka with a smirk gave him a thumbs up. Hesitantly the blue-haired teen looked at Toru and spoke. "I like you too actually, but I would like to get to know you a bit more before dating you fully. Is that alright?" Toru jumped up with a huge smile and glomped him. Izuku, reacting quickly, hugged her back but soon pushed her away and apologized. "Sorry Toru, I got concrete dust and most likely ash all over you." Looked down at her body. Toru saw herself full of gray and black dust on the front of her clothes and arms. She looked up at the taller teen and shook her head with wistful smile. "It's fine, besides I'm the one who hugged you." Rubbing his neck, Izuku replied back, "I guess, but I still feel bad." Seeing the opportunity in front of her, Kyoka snorted and spoke cheekily. "Well, why don't you pay her back by helping her wash up? I'm sure she'd enjoy your hands all over her soft and supple body." "Kyo, quit being so perverted," shouted Momo, who gulped down a bite of her cake to speak. Izuku and Toru were both blushing furiously and jumped away from each other. and while sneaking glances at each other they blushed upon their eyes meeting. It was then, however, that Momo remembered what Aizawa had asked of her when Izuku returned. She turned to her love and said, "Izuku-kun sensei asked for me to tell you that Nezu would like to speak with you in his office when you returned." Turning to his raven-haired girlfriend, Izuku asked, "Did he say if I had to do it right away?" Momo shrugged in an undignified manner. "He didn't say, but you most likely won't be reprimanded if you take a short shower." "Right, I'll do that and be right back after I'm done talking to Nezu. I'll probably be back in time for dinner, but if not then please save me a plate." The girls nodded to this and Izuku rushed off to his room's bathroom with his clothes in hand. Quickly he put his clothes away before getting dressed in some jeans, sneakers and a gray long-sleeved shirt with the sleeve rolled up to the elbow. After getting dressed and making sure he didn't have any more pieces of concrete in his hair, Izuku left his room and went downstairs to see the girls had put on a movie. He didn't recognize the movie, but he didn't linger on it as he went over to them. He gave Momo and Kyoka a kiss on their cheeks goodbye before turning to Toru. The not-so-invisible girl blushed as he looked at her, wondering if he should do the same to her. But right as he was about to turn away he saw the expected look on her beautiful face. Her lips were puckered lightly with a glint in her eyes that made Izuku lean forward. Their lips met, making Toru's and Izuku's hearts flutter at the warm sensation. It being Toru's first time caused her to reach for his cheek as she felt her heart begin to blossom in a way she had never felt before. But the kiss could only last for so long. Eventually they parted with their eyes peering into the others with a sense of love that was slowly but surely beginning to form between them. Clearing his throat and looking away from the beauty in front of him, Izuku's face burned brightly as he said, "That was nice. I have to go, but it was very cool." Snorting, Toru smiled at his shy nature, but her only reply due to her own shyness was a quiet response, "Yes, very cool." Gulping, Izuku looked into her eyes and smiled softly. "I'll talk to you later. See you, Toru-chan." Smiling back, Toru waved and replied back, "See ya later, Izuku-kun." Izuku walked out of the dorm with one last wave towards the girls, and when they made sure he left far enough by waiting a few minutes, Kyoka spoke in a smug voice. "So, you want some of Izuku's cake too, huh?" "Kyoka!" yelled Toru in embarrassment, echoing throughout the dorms. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and now we will see you in the next video.